Hi guys, tonight we're heading somewhere cold, so cold that your eyelashes would freeze together before you even blinked. You're standing on the deck of a medieval pirate ship, the boards slick with frost, the sea around you dark as spilled ink. The wind cuts through your coat like a knife, and you wonder how anyone could sleep out here, let alone dream. But they did, and tonight you're going to find out how. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights and let's step into the story. You trudge across the frozen deck, each footstep giving off a small, sharp crunch. It's long past midnight, and the sea has gone strangely still, the kind of silence that only happens when even the wind has given up. The sails above hang like ghostly sheets, stiff with ice, creaking when the ship shifts. There's a faint glimmer from the lantern swinging near the mast, its light distorted by the cold fog curling up from the water. Your fingers are already numb, your breath puffing white against the black sky. Somewhere below deck, a man coughs, wet and deep. Another mutters a prayer to Saint Elmo, patron of sailors and lightning, though you can't tell whether it's gratitude or desperation. The smell of salt and tar mixes with something sour, unwashed wool maybe, or the last of a barrel gone bad. You look up at the rigging and imagine men climbing it even in weather like this, their hands bare, their boots slick, just to adjust the frozen lines. They'd sleep where they could if they could. Pirates didn't have luxury cabins, not the kind you see in movies. Most slept wherever there was room to lie down without being trampled. Sometimes that meant between barrels, sometimes on top of coils of rope. And when the cold came, when winter seas turned savage, it meant trying to survive in conditions that would drive most modern sailors below deck, screaming for a hot shower. You rub your hands together, trying to feel your fingertips. The air tastes metallic, like old coins. Some nights, the cold was so intense that metal buckles stuck to skin. Pirates, for all their swagger, didn't escape nature's cruelty. Ships from the 15th and 16th centuries weren't insulated. The decks leaked, the hulls groaned, and the only thing standing between a man and hypothermia was a threadbare blanket and the warmth of the crew packed like sardines. Historians still argue whether pirates deliberately avoided the far north or simply had no choice when chasing trade routes. But one thing's certain, winter on a ship was merciless. The North Sea could turn to slush, the Baltic to glass. Ice formed on the rigging until it weighed down the masts. Men chipped at it with knives just to keep the sails from snapping. You pause near the bow, leaning over the rail. The sea below looks solid enough to walk on, a rolling plain of grey-blue ice shards. Somewhere beyond that horizon are ports frozen shut, fishermen stranded ashore, and the faint hope of warmth. The pirates aboard this ship didn't have that hope. Out here, the cold wasn't a visitor, it was a crew member. A fact often forgotten, pirates weren't always from the tropics. The romantic Caribbean image came later. In medieval Europe, especially between the 13th and 16th centuries, pirates often roamed the North Atlantic, the English Channel, or the coasts of Scandinavia. They raided merchant ships from Hanseatic ports, or even the icy northern whaling routes. The term Viking had long faded, but its echoes lingered in the cold breath of men still living by plunder and sail. And here's a quirky tidbit to keep your imagination awake for a few minutes longer. Some of these pirates rubbed their hands with whale oil before sleep to trap heat under their skin. Whale oil, thick and greasy, worked like a primitive thermal layer. It smelled awful, of course, but when your bones ached from cold, vanity wasn't a concern. You can almost feel that slick residue now, mixed with salt and grime, catching what little warmth the body could produce. You step closer to a small wooden hatch leading below deck. The light spilling from it is faint and yellow, flickering like a heartbeat. Inside, the air will be different, warmer perhaps, but suffocatingly so. The men down there will be huddled in clusters, wrapped in whatever cloth they could steal or stitch. Maybe one snores through missing teeth, another dreams of gold he'll never spend. Sleep on a ship like this wasn't gentle. It was a negotiation between exhaustion and fear. The wind picks up again, whining low through the rigging. You pull your coat tighter, though it does little. Your mind wanders to how pirates measured comfort, not by softness, but by survival. A night where you didn't lose a toe to frostbite counted as luxury. A morning where the ship hadn't cracked its hull on floating ice felt like a blessing. The sea didn't care about their crimes or their courage. It just existed, cold and infinite, testing whoever dared cross it. You glance at the stars, faint pinpricks blurred by thin clouds. Somewhere above them, the same constellations have watched centuries of sailors struggle through nights just like this. Orion's belt, the North Star, familiar companions to men who had nothing else to rely on. The rhythmic creak of the mast becomes almost hypnotic, like a lullaby built from wood and wind. There's a beauty in it too, if you squint through the misery. The frost along the rail sparkles faintly, catching the lantern light. The sea breathes in slow waves, steady as sleep itself. You think of the crew below, each one a story, some murderers, some runaways, some just desperate. Tonight, they share the same enemy, the cold. Tomorrow, perhaps, they'll return to killing. But for now, they just want to keep breathing. You run your hand over the deck rail and feel the thin crust of ice flake beneath your palm. It's rough, real. For all its danger, the ship is alive, groaning like a living thing under stress. Somewhere, a rope snaps, and someone curses softly. The sound fades quickly into the night, swallowed by the wind. The historians who write about these ships often focus on the battles, the treasures, the flags. But the truth, the small human truth, lives in these frozen nights, in how they slept with their boots on because undressing meant death, in how one man's blanket might be stolen the moment he drifted off, in how sometimes they sang quietly into the dark, their voices trembling but steady, to remind themselves they were still there. You feel the ship roll beneath your feet, gentle but insistent. Somewhere deep in the hold, barrels shift and chains rattle. You can almost hear the ghosts of all who came before, sailors, raiders, dreamers, each one leaving behind a breath of warmth in the endless cold. And as you stand there, under the brittle sky, you realize this story isn't about treasure or glory. It's about survival, the most ancient, fragile kind. The kind that happens one shivering night at a time, when all you can do is hold on to the creaking wood beneath you and hope the sea doesn't notice you tonight. The ship groans beneath your feet as you shift your weight, the boards flexing just enough to remind you that this entire world of wood and rope is floating on an endless, merciless sea. The air feels colder now, a steady wind slicing through the rigging. You can hear the sound of ropes straining and timbers answering in low, aching voices. Every creak and pop feels alive, as if the ship itself is trying to talk to you. You move slowly, feeling your way along the icy railing. The moonlight spills in thin, silver bands across the deck, catching the frost that glitters like powdered glass. Every breath you take rises in a pale cloud before fading into the night. The sails are stiff, heavy with ice, their canvas edges frozen into strange, rippling shapes that look more like sculptures than fabric. You pause for a moment and listen. The ocean has gone quiet except for the faint hiss of small waves lapping against the hull. Somewhere nearby, a loose rope bangs rhythmically against the mast. That sound could drive a man mad after enough sleepless nights. You picture the pirates trying to sleep with that steady knocking, mixed with the groaning of the planks and the occasional scream of the wind through the rigging. Sleep was a battle they fought every night, not with swords but with sound. The upper deck is deserted. Most of the crew have already vanished below to escape the wind. You can almost see their shadows moving down there, cramped together in a space that smells of salt, sweat and mold. A lantern swings just above the hatch, its light golden but weak, painting the air with slow-moving halos. You reach out to steady it, and your fingers brush the metal handle. The cold burns your skin, so you pull back quickly. Every surface on this ship bites. Even the ropes, stiff with frozen salt, cut your palms if you grip too tightly. It is easy to understand why some men refuse to climb the rigging in winter. A single slip on the ice could send them overboard, vanishing into the black water before anyone even noticed. There is a small fact that might surprise you. Medieval ships were never quiet, not even in still weather. The constant flexing of wood, the rhythm of waves slapping the hull, the wind thrumming in the ropes, all of it created a living symphony that never stopped. It was the ocean's version of white noise, only sharper, harsher, and laced with danger. Pirates grew used to it. Many could not sleep on land afterward, unable to rest without that chorus of creaks and sighs. And then there is the smell. Every ship carried its own perfume of survival. You can imagine it now, the heavy scent of tar, the sourness of unwashed clothes, the faint sweetness of stale rum, and something darker beneath it all, like rot or damp wool. It was the smell of confinement and endurance, the scent of men who could not escape their own ship even if they wanted to. You walk toward the bow, the wood beneath your boots, slick and shining. The railing is coated in rime, each line of ice catching the light like crystal veins. Somewhere deep inside the hull, the sound of snoring rises and falls. It is strange, almost peaceful, that anyone could sleep through this. Yet they did. They had to. A man who could not sleep at sea would lose his mind within weeks. The reality check comes quietly. Most of these pirates would never live long enough to grow old. Disease, cold, starvation, and battle took them young. You probably would not survive this week, let alone the winter. The air alone could break your spirit. But here they are, finding rest between storms, wrapped in threadbare blankets or curled in corners where the wind does not reach. One quirky fact that always fascinates historians is that pirates often slept near their weapons. Cutlasses, pistols, and daggers were kept within arm's reach, even while dreaming. It was not paranoia, it was practicality. On a ship filled with thieves and killers, the line between sleep and death was thin. Some men even tied their weapons to their belts before lying down so no one could steal them. Imagine the clinking of metal as they turned over, the dull thud of a pistol sliding against the planks. You crouch and rest a hand against the deck, feeling the faint vibration of waves beneath. There is a rhythm to it, slow and deep, like the heartbeat of something ancient. The ship talks to you through those shudders, whispering its age and its burden. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the wind, the wood, the soft murmur of life below deck. Historians still debate whether pirates preferred to sleep above deck or below during the coldest voyages. Some argue that staying below offered warmth from the bodies of other men and the ship's enclosed air. Others claim that the lower decks were so foul, damp, and airless that men would rather risk frostbite under the stars. Both might be true. You can picture it. One man wrapped in wool below, sweating from the stench, another curled under the open sky, shivering but breathing fresh air. The lantern light flickers again. You lean against the mast and feel its steady pulse, the wood shifting with every roll of the ship. It feels alive beneath your shoulder, like an old animal breathing in its sleep. The ropes hanging nearby knock together softly, a steady beat in the quiet night. The world has shrunk to the ship, the sea, and the sound of the cold. The horizon is gone, the stars dulled by drifting clouds. You can almost forget there is land anywhere at all. Out here, the pirates were trapped between two infinities, the frozen sky above and the endless water below. Their only real home was the fragile planks between them. You take one last, slow look around. The deck is a map of frost and moonlight. Every line, every nail, every frozen puddle tells a story of human stubbornness. The men below are sleeping, if you can call it that, while their ship whispers and groans around them. And you, standing here with your breath hanging in the air, can almost feel what they felt. The uneasy peace between exhaustion and fear, the strange beauty of surviving just one more night. You climb down a short ladder toward the lower deck, where the air grows thicker and smells of tar, old wood, and bodies pressed too close for comfort. The sound of the sea fades to a muted hum, replaced by the soft sway of ropes and the groan of the hull. Down here you finally see them, the sleeping pirates. Not on feather beds or in bunks like soldiers, but in narrow hammocks strung side to side, creaking as the ship moves beneath them. Your breath catches. It feels like entering a different world, a floating cave that rocks with each passing wave. Lantern light paints everything in dull gold, swinging slowly, making shadows crawl along the beams. The hammocks sway gently, each one holding a shape wrapped in rough fabric. They look peaceful, but you know better. The sea never truly lets anyone rest. A small recorded detail from early seafaring days notes that hammocks were first used not for comfort, but for safety. Sailors learned that sleeping on the deck was dangerous. One roll of the ship could throw a man into a wall or send him crashing to the floor. Hammocks changed that. Suspended by ropes, they moved with the ship, cradling the body rather than fighting against it. Pirates adopted them quickly. A man in a hammock could sleep without bruising his ribs. You step closer and touch the edge of one. The fabric is stiff with salt and cold, its fibers rough and gritty beneath your fingers. You can imagine how it felt against skin rubbed raw by sea air. A curious little detail you might not expect is that some pirates lined their hammocks with stolen sailcloth or even animal fur if they were lucky. Anything that could trap a little warmth was precious. The fabric smelled of smoke, sweat and salt, but that mix meant survival. As you listen to the rhythm of the hammocks swaying, it almost feels hypnotic. Each one creaks in a slightly different pitch, blending into a strange lullaby. The sound has weight, like time itself swinging back and forth. The ship sighs as if it shares the same exhausted rhythm. You notice a man shifting in his sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. Another snorts, turns over, and the hammock spins lazily before settling again. Somewhere above, water drips through the seams of the deck, pattering into a bucket with a steady plink. A thin draft snakes down through the cracks, making the lantern flame flicker. You pull your coat tighter, but the air here clings to your skin like cold breath. It's easy to think pirates were used to hardship, but exhaustion breaks even the hardest men. Records from merchant ships of the same era mention sailors working for 18 hours or more in brutal weather, sleeping only in short bursts. Pirates were no different. Their lives depended on alertness, so rest came in fragments. 2 hours here, 3 hours there. No one ever truly slept deeply, not when every creak could mean a leak or a knife. Experts still cannot agree on how pirates divided sleeping shifts during the harshest winters. Some argue for a strict rotation similar to naval crews, where half the men were awake while the rest slept. Others think pirate life was more chaotic, that men collapsed wherever they stood once exhaustion overcame them. The truth may be buried in the salt and silence of the sea itself. You glance around the cramped space. The hammocks hang so close that they touch when the ship rolls. You could reach out and brush your hand across 3 men without taking a step. In this closeness, privacy disappears. Every breath, every snore, every whispered dream becomes part of a shared existence. You realize that even here, pirates were a kind of family, bound by need more than loyalty. Imagine the air on the coldest nights, heavy with moisture, your breath clouding even indoors. The walls drip with condensation, the ropes damp to the touch. The smell of wet wool and human closeness fills the lungs. You can almost taste the salt in it. Then, a sudden creak splits the quiet. The ship shifts, and a few men murmur in their sleep. One opens an eye, then closes it again. These men have learned to sleep through everything. The sound of waves slapping the hull becomes background music. The rocking motion that would make you seasick now rocks them to sleep like children. Here is a surprisingly human habit from old accounts. Sailors, including pirates, often hummed softly to steady themselves before sleep. A tune might pass from one hammock to another, changing slightly each time. It was not quite music, not quite prayer, but something between the two. It kept fear at bay when storms gathered. Some nights, the ship itself seemed to hum back, the wood vibrating with their low voices. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. The sway of the hammocks, the crackle of lantern light, the occasional drip of seawater, it all blurs together into a rhythm that feels eternal. This is how they survived the cold, not by conquering it, but by swaying with it, accepting it as part of their strange, floating world. There is beauty in this balance. The hammocks, each one a fragile cocoon, hold lives suspended between danger and dreams. Outside, the sea is black and endless, but here inside this narrow wooden belly, men drift half asleep, trusting that the ropes will hold and the ship will keep floating until morning. You open your eyes again and watch the shadows move. For a moment, you forget the cold, the danger, the history. You just see motion and rest, life and sleep, all swaying gently together under the weight of the sea. You duck lower into the ship's belly, careful not to hit your head against the low beams. The space narrows as you move forward, the air growing thicker with each step. It feels warmer here, but not in a pleasant way. The heat is stale, trapped beneath the planks, mingled with the smell of salt, smoke, and human breath. Your boots stick slightly to the damp floorboards, slick with condensation that drips from above. The dim light barely reaches the corners. A single lantern swings from a hook, its flames struggling against the drafts that slip through the seams. The glow trembles over sleeping bodies and open barrels. Every object casts a wavering shadow that seems alive. You can hear quiet snores, the rustle of fabric, and the occasional clink of metal when someone shifts and a blade taps against wood. The walls here are lined with rough boards, patched where leaks once were. The hull creaks with every swell, and a drop of icy water lands on your neck. You shiver. This was where pirates truly lived at sea, not on open decks under moonlight, but in the damp gloom below, half buried in ropes, barrels, and bodies. It is written in the journals of sailors from the late Middle Ages that the lower deck was both haven and prison. Up above, the wind could kill you with frost. Down here, the air might choke you first. Yet most men preferred it. Even foul air felt kinder than the bite of open sky. A peculiar truth about life below deck was how every sound echoed. A man coughing in the corner could be heard across the room. Conversations turned into whispers, and whispers often into secrets. Here, alliances were formed, grudges brewed, and stories told between breaths. The cold may have ruled the sea, but down here, warmth came from company. You crouch near a pile of tattered blankets. The fabric is coarse, patched from different materials. Some wool, some linen, some so thin you can see through them. The smell rising from them is heavy and earthy. You imagine 2 or 3 men sharing one, wrapped together in exhausted silence. In one corner, you notice a small figure, perhaps a boy, no older than 15, huddled with his knees to his chest, his back against a barrel. The pirates kept young hands on board to do the dirtiest work, cleaning decks, running messages, patching leaks. Many never saw land again. For them, the lower deck was bedroom, classroom, and nightmare all in one. You step closer to the hull and press your hand against it. The wood feels alive, cold and damp, but pulsing faintly with the movement of the waves outside. You feel every vibration as the ship rocks. It is hard to imagine sleeping through that endless sway, yet the men here did so every night. Sleep, for them, was not about comfort but escape. Accounts from explorers of the same era suggest that crews often divided the hold into crude sleeping areas with ropes or hanging cloth. It gave the illusion of privacy, though no one was ever truly alone. A cough or cry would break through the thin barriers. Some even carved small charms into the beams near their hammocks, hoping for protection from the sea. A strangely touching practice is noted in a few surviving ship logs. When the weather was at its worst, some pirates would keep a small ember in a covered bowl of sand, shielding it like treasure. The ember would glow faintly through the night, a fragile promise of warmth. They called it the heart of the ship, If it went out, men said bad luck was coming. Researchers today still cannot decide whether this ritual was widespread or confined to a few desperate crews. The evidence is fragmentary, half folklore and half fact. But even imagining it, you can see the meaning clearly. In the blackness of the ship's belly, a single red ember must have felt like life itself. You look around and think of the stories that must have been told in this space. Men bragging about raids gone right, whispering of storms that almost swallowed them whole. Others remembering homes they would never see again. The voices must have blended with the creaks and drips, weaving the ship's own kind of music. The air grows heavier as you linger. You begin to notice the layers of sound that fill the space. The rhythmic thump of waves against the hull, the faint wheeze of the wind through the cracks, the quiet groans of sleepers turning in their hammocks. All of it mixes into a pulse that feels oddly comforting. The ship breathes with them, its lungs filled with salt and human dreams. You kneel beside one hammock and study its occupant, a man with a tangled beard, his face half buried in rough cloth, one arm hanging loose toward the floor. His hand twitches as though still gripping a rope or sword. Even in sleep, he cannot let go of his work. The sea never allows that kind of surrender. For a moment, you close your eyes and try to imagine sleeping here. The heat pressing down, the stink of mold and sweat, the wooden walls sighing with every swell. Yet amid that discomfort, there is also something gentle. The sway of the ship rocks you without asking permission, a cradle carved from hardship. One forgotten sailor once wrote in a marginal note that, below the deck, the ship holds her breath. You feel that truth now. The air is thick but quiet, as though the whole vessel pauses while its crew sleeps. Above, the cold night howls. Down here, in this dim cocoon, the men find fragile peace before dawn wakes the waves again. You pull yourself back toward the main deck again, where a faint glimmer of morning light slips through the cracks in the planks. The cold air greets you immediately, biting into your cheeks. You can smell the ocean again, sharp and clean, mixed with the tang of old salt and damp rope. The sky is the color of steel, and you feel the first whisper of snow in the wind. The crew begins to stir. One man stretches, another coughs, his breath forming small clouds. You notice how they are dressed. Nothing looks uniform. Their layers are a mix of whatever fabric they could steal, trade, or patch together. The sight tells a quiet story about survival. Documents from the 15th century mention that sailors often wore wool next to the skin, then linen, then heavy coats made of canvas or hide. Pirates copied this habit, wrapping themselves in whatever could trap warmth. Some even wore women's skirts or priests' robes stolen from raids, torn and re-sewn into cloaks. It did not matter how it looked. Warmth was worth more than pride. You watch as one pirate adjusts a scarf made of bright red fabric, its edges frayed but thick. He ties it twice around his neck and tucks it under his chin, muttering something about keeping the devil's fingers off his throat. A curious superstition, perhaps. Sailors believed the cold carried spirits that could crawl into a man's lungs while he slept. A scarf was more than comfort. It was protection. The wind grows stronger, snapping the stiff sails. You pull your coat tighter. Even from here, you can feel the frost forming on the ropes, the way it stiffens every knot. The men rub their hands together and stamp their feet, trying to coax warmth back into their limbs. One laughs bitterly and says, "The sea steals heat faster than it steals gold." It is written in old merchant records that winter voyages were a test of endurance more than navigation. The sea froze, sails stiffened, and men died not from storms, but from slow creeping cold. Some crews packed extra blankets, but most simply layered everything they owned. When that failed, they stuffed their clothes with moss, straw, or shredded cloth from torn sails, anything to stop the wind from biting the skin. A small but fascinating practice from northern pirate crews involved rubbing seal fat on their faces and hands before nightfall. It worked like primitive insulation, trapping body heat and keeping moisture from freezing the skin. The smell must have been horrendous, thick and fishy, but those who used it swore it saved their fingers. You can almost smell it now, that pungent mix of oil and salt carried on the breeze. The cold is not just a sensation here, it is a presence. It seeps into everything, from the wood of the ship to the bones of the men. You notice how their movements grow slower, more deliberate, as if conserving energy with every step. There is no fire on deck, only the faint warmth of bodies working side by side. Scholars remain divided on whether pirates in northern waters carried extra furs from their raids or relied solely on stolen naval supplies. Some argue that plundered ships provided coats from soldiers and merchants alike, while others claim pirates lived too chaotically to stockpile clothing at all. The truth likely changes from ship to ship. What is clear is that no one faced the cold unprepared twice. You crouch to study the deck boards. Frost has crept into the grain, turning the wood white in patches. Your breath rises and vanishes instantly. You think about how the pirates must have felt waking up here each morning, shaking out frozen hammocks, pulling on boots that had turned hard as stone overnight. Some must have cursed the sea, others laughed at it, knowing complaint would not make it warmer. It is easy to forget that most ships of this time had no insulation at all. The planks were thin, sealed only by pitch and tar, which cracked in deep cold. Every gust of wind slipped through the seams. Every drop of seawater turned to ice within minutes. If a man's clothes got wet, he had to strip them off and beat them against the mast until the ice cracked. Otherwise, he might freeze where he stood. You can almost feel the stiff fabric between your hands, rough and cold, edges cutting your skin as you try to soften it again. The ship becomes a wardrobe of frozen cloth, hanging limp and brittle like the skin of some enormous creature. A seagull cries overhead, its voice sharp against the silence. The pirates look up instinctively. One of them jokes that the bird must be lost, that even gulls avoid this kind of winter. Laughter spreads in short bursts, warm for a moment before fading back into quiet. Humor is one of the few comforts left to them. You take another slow look around. Every man is wrapped differently. One in patched wool, another in layers of sailcloth, another in something that might once have been a tapestry. The variety makes them look less like a crew and more like a band of ghosts, draped in whatever remnants the world had forgotten. There is something oddly beautiful about it. The colours, though faded, catch the light muted reds, browns and greys. The wind pulls at their clothes, setting the edges fluttering. The scene looks almost painterly, as if frozen in time. And then, a sharp sound breaks the calm. A crack, quick and loud, like glass shattering. A rope has snapped somewhere above, and the pirates look up. One curses under his breath. They move quickly, still sluggish from sleep, but their instincts sharp. The cold makes every task harder, every motion slower. You can see their breath like smoke trails weaving through the air as they work. When the rope is fixed, the ship settles again into its rhythm. The sea murmurs against the hull. One man yawns and wraps his cloak tighter, muttering something about the cold creeping through his dreams. You know what he means. Out here, the cold does not wait for you to fall asleep. It finds its way into your thoughts first. As you watch them work, you begin to understand that their layered clothes are more than protection. They are armor against both nature and despair. Each scrap of fabric, each patch sewn by tired fingers, tells the story of men who refuse to surrender to the sea's indifference. And so they move, wrapped in their mismatched layers, their breath rising like faint ghosts in the pale morning. Above them, the frozen sails crack softly as the wind stirs again, and the ship continues on, carrying its shivering legends across an unforgiving horizon. You follow the scent of smoke and ash toward the galley, the small space where pirates cooked, argued, and sometimes tried to stay warm. The passage narrows as you move, your boots thudding softly against the boards. The air feels heavier here, carrying the faint odor of burned fat and tar. Somewhere close, metal clinks against metal. You can almost taste the iron in the air. Inside the galley, the light is dim, shaped by a single oil lamp that swings slowly from a chain. The glow paints the walls in trembling amber. You notice the small blackened hearth built from stones and reinforced with iron plates. A few embers glow faintly at its heart, but there is no open flame. Pirates knew better than to risk that. Records from early naval expeditions make it clear that fire on a wooden ship was every sailor's nightmare. One spark could turn the vessel into an inferno before anyone reached water. Pirates had to choose between freezing or suffocating in smoke. Most of the time, they chose the cold. You crouch near the hearth, watching the tiny glow pulse. The air smells of wet wood, boiled salt beef, and smoke trapped for days. The pirates gather around it like moths. Some stretch their hands close, careful not to touch the iron. Their fingers are cracked and raw from cold. A few hold tin cups filled with rum that they sip slowly, their eyes fixed on the embers as if praying they will not die out. Here's a small but curious detail from ship logs. To create warmth without open fire, crews often filled iron pots with heated stones or sand. They would seal the top with cloth and carry these makeshift heaters below deck. The warmth lasted for hours, just enough to thaw stiff fingers or melt ice on ropes. You can imagine the smell of scorched fabric mixed with the sea air. The wind howls faintly above, pressing through every crack. The lamp flickers, throwing long shadows that dance across the walls. The pirates are quiet, moving slowly. One scrapes the last bits of food from a pan. Another wipes his knife on his sleeve and mutters about the cold settling into his bones. They talk about warmth as if it were treasure. Modern researchers still cannot agree how crews managed heat during deep winter voyages. Some claim they built small, shielded braziers that burned in the open air when the sea was calm. Others believe they used sealed lanterns filled with whale oil, their faint heat multiplied by layers of wool and bodies packed close together. Whatever the truth, it was a dangerous balance. One wrong move could mean death by fire or frost. You sit beside them in the dim light. The glow from the coals breathes like a living thing. Every few seconds, one pirate leans forward with a stick to stir the ashes, coaxing more life from the heat. The room feels smaller when the warmth returns, as though the air itself softens. For a moment, everyone relaxes, shoulders dropping, eyes half closing. Then someone laughs softly, breaking the silence. He points at a dented copper kettle hanging from a hook. The handle has been wrapped with rope, and a small wooden carving dangles from it, shaped like a fish. It's a charm, a small promise that the ship will not burn. The men grin and tap it before turning back to their work. A sailor's life was full of such tokens. They carried pieces of bone, bits of shell, or carvings from driftwood, each with its own story. These were not luxuries. They were faith in solid form. When the world around you was made of ice and salt, even superstition had weight. You feel the ship tilt slightly beneath your feet. A few drops of hot water spill from a pot and hiss when they hit the cold floor. The pirates curse quietly, moving to steady the pans. One of them jokes that the ship must be jealous of the warmth. Laughter ripples again, short but genuine. It feels like a small victory, proof that spirits still burn even when fire cannot. Outside, the wind begins to rise. You can hear the sails strain and the ropes hum under tension. The sound creeps down through the wood, a reminder that the cold is always waiting, just beyond the walls. The pirates glance toward the ceiling instinctively. The sea is never far away. A fascinating account from a 14th century voyage mentions that sailors sometimes used heated cannonballs to warm their quarters. They would take one from the galley fire, roll it across the deck in a bucket of sand, and then place it in a metal box to radiate heat. The risk was immense, yet the reward was a few hours of bearable cold. It is hard to say whether pirates truly dared it, but the idea alone shows the lengths they went to for survival. You imagine that glow, faint and red, flickering across the faces of exhausted men. The light catches on scars, in beards, in eyes dulled by fatigue. They lean closer, chasing warmth that never lasts. The air smells of smoke, sweat, and old rum. The noise of the ship fades into the background until only the slow crackle of the coals remains. It is easy to see how the act of keeping a fire alive, however small, became something sacred. It was the ship's heartbeat, a pulse of light against the dark. A sailor would sit awake long after the others had fallen asleep, tending that fragile heat as though guarding life itself. You lean back, listening to the faint music of the sea against the hull. Above, the wind continues to sing. The pirates stretch out, their shoulders glowing faintly in the light, their breath misting in the air. For a brief moment, the room feels almost human, almost safe. Then the lamp flickers, and the cold slips back in, quiet but patient. The warmth fades quickly, leaving only the smell of ashes and salt. You can feel the change in the air, the reminder that no comfort lasts long out here. But in this fleeting moment, as the embers glow and the men's eyes grow heavy, the cold seems far away. The ship sighs again, and somewhere deep inside it, a small, glowing coal keeps breathing. You climb back toward the middeck where the light is thin and blue, a sign that the day is beginning but the sun has not yet conquered the mist. The air feels brittle, as if it might shatter if you breathe too sharply. Above you, the rigging hums with the wind, the sails strain, and you hear the creak of wood moving in slow rhythm. It is not the sound of chaos, but of duty. The ship never sleeps, not even when the crew tries to. The rotation of the night watches dictates the rhythm of everyone's life here. Pirates, like naval crews, divided their time into shifts called watches. Some men kept guard while others rested, and every few hours the bell would ring to switch them. It was the only clock they truly trusted. You imagine the tone of that bell, dull and distant, cutting through dreams like a whisper from the sea itself. Historical records from early privateers describe these watch rotations as both discipline and curse. Too much rest meant danger, too little meant madness. Pirates, never fond of order, often bent the schedule to fit their moods or needs. Some slept 2 hours at a time. Others refused sleep entirely until exhaustion forced them down. What mattered was not the number of hours, but the rhythm itself, the pulse of ship life that never stopped. You lean on the railing, feeling it cold beneath your palms. The horizon glows faintly. A few men shuffle out from below deck, eyes bleary, hair matted with frost. One yawns so hard you hear his jaw crack. Another splashes a handful of seawater on his face, gasps, and laughs at the shock of it. Their voices sound hoarse, yet alive. The next watch has begun. A fascinating note from a 16th century sailor's diary reveals that men on watch used music to keep themselves awake. Not the kind you might expect, but low humming, rhythmic stamping, or the tapping of spoons on barrels. It kept time with the rocking of the ship. You can almost hear it now, a slow, murmuring percussion that floats across the deck like a heartbeat. The man at the wheel grips it tight, his fingers red and cracked. The ship tilts slightly as he adjusts the course. Beside him, another man peers into the mist, watching for shapes that could mean ice or enemy sails. Neither speaks. They do not need to. Out here, silence is its own language. There is something meditative about the way they move, as if the body learns to follow the rhythm of the ocean. You begin to understand why so many sailors describe the sea as both torment and teacher. The motion seeps into the bones, and even in sleep, the body rocks as if still at work. It is said that men who returned to land often swayed unconsciously for days, their bodies still trying to balance on invisible waves. Not every watch is peaceful. Sometimes the darkness hides more than waves. One man glances over his shoulder often, checking shadows as though expecting something to climb from the sea. You remember hearing that sailors once believed in creatures that followed ships, waiting for the moment a man fell overboard. The fear of being alone in the dark ocean was more terrible than battle itself. The rotation continues. The men who just finished their shift stumble below deck, their faces grey with fatigue. One of them rubs his chest as though trying to chase away the chill that never leaves. They will sleep now, if the noise and cold allow it, until the next bell wakes them again. Experts today still discuss how much rest pirates truly managed at sea. Some estimates suggest they slept less than 4 hours a day during long voyages. Others believe the chaos of pirate life allowed longer naps between raids, a luxury no navy could afford. The truth lies somewhere in the blur between exhaustion and necessity. You step closer to the main mast where a lantern hangs. The flame flickers weakly, but its light spreads across the deck, illuminating the frost clinging to ropes and railings. You run your fingers along one of the ropes, feeling the stiff salt crust that forms overnight. It crunches slightly beneath your touch. Everything here is touched by the sea, even the smallest fibers. One of the pirates on watch begins to whistle softly, a slow tune that sounds more like mourning than music. The others glance his way but do not stop him. The sound drifts through the air, curling around the masts and fading into the distance. It fills the silence without breaking it. In this rhythm, the ship becomes a living organism. Each man is a cell, each watch a heartbeat. When one part fails, the rest must carry on. That understanding binds them more tightly than any code of loyalty. The ocean teaches unity through fear. A curious little tradition from some crews involved the passing of a token during watch changes. It might be a carved bead, a button, or a scrap of rope, symbolizing the weight of responsibility. The man beginning his shift would hold it briefly, whisper something only he could hear, then tie it to his wrist. To drop or lose it was considered bad luck. You picture rough hands exchanging that tiny object in the freezing air, a simple act that carried enormous meaning. The sky brightens slightly, a faint promise of day. The sea remains dark, though it glitters where ice drifts float by. You watch as the pirates scan the horizon, their eyes narrowed against the wind. Sleep still clings to their faces, but alertness returns, slow and steady. The bell rings again, a hollow sound swallowed by the mist. Another rotation begins, another trade between sleep and duty. You realize that this rhythm never stops, not for weather, not for exhaustion, not even for fear. The ship's life depends on it. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound of the bell echo through your chest. It is not a harsh sound anymore. It feels like breathing, constant and calm, an anchor against the chaos of the sea. The pirates live and sleep by that rhythm, and in a strange way, so do you now. The next evening, the cold grows deeper, and the air feels heavy enough to drink. The sky is bruised with purple clouds, and the waves have slowed to a thick, sluggish roll. The ship moves like a tired animal through the water. Lanterns swing lazily, and the pirates gather close, their faces shadowed and pale. Tonight, rum will be the only warmth that reaches them. The smell hits you first, sweet, sharp, and earthy, a mix of molasses and smoke. Someone passes a flask along the line, taking turns without a word. The rum burns the throat, but it also blurs the cold, makes the edges of the night softer. One man sighs with relief after his drink, as if he can finally feel his heart again. Historical journals often mention that rum was both comfort and curse aboard ships of this age. The strong liquor numbed pain, quieted fear, and filled empty bellies when food ran short. But it also dulled reflexes, frayed tempers, and fueled fights that could end with blood on the planks. Pirates, unlike naval crews, had no rations to control their drinking. A cask might last a week or a night, depending on their mood and misery. You sit near the group, listening to their talk. The sound of their laughter carries easily in the still air, low and rough. Their stories wander between truth and imagination, stitched together by the rhythm of their cups. One speaks of a raid near the Canary Islands, where they drank more than they fought. Another swears he once saw frost form on a man's beard so thick it broke when he smiled. Here's an odd little truth drawn from sailors' accounts. Some crews mixed rum with seawater, both to stretch it and to avoid the shock of drinking it neat in the cold. They called it grog, a word that would later drift into naval tradition. The salt made it worse for thirst, but easier on frozen throats. You can almost taste it, sharp and briny, as if the ocean itself were in the cup. The light from the lantern catches the surface of a bottle, making it glow amber in the dark. The pirates watch it the way men on land might watch a fireplace. The rum becomes a substitute for heat, a trick for the body as much as for the mind. The wind moans softly through the rigging. One pirate begins to hum, his voice cracked and low. Others join in, the melody slow and uncertain, a lullaby stitched from exhaustion. It is not a song of victory or hope, but something older, something that belongs to the sea. You can feel it in your chest, that strange calm that comes after too much drink and too little sleep. Experts continue to discuss whether alcohol actually helped sailors survive cold voyages. Some argue that it only gave the illusion of warmth, drawing heat from the body faster once the buzz faded. Others suggest that, in small doses, it offered real comfort, enough to keep despair from sinking too deep. What no one doubts is its power over morale. A warm drink, even a dangerous one, kept men alive in spirit if not in body. You watch as one pirate wipes his mouth and grins through cracked lips. His teeth are yellow, his cheeks hollow. He taps the bottle against the mast and says, "To the cold, may it drink slower than we do." The others laugh, though it is the kind of laughter that hides something brittle underneath. The ship rolls gently, and the lantern light ripples across the deck. A few men lean back against barrels, eyes half closed. Their words blur into mumbling. Rum has a way of making time slip sideways. Minutes stretch into hours without anyone noticing. The rhythm of the sea and the buzz of alcohol melt together until even the cold feels far away. But the peace never lasts long. A shout breaks from the other end of the deck, harsh and slurred. Two men argue over a cup. The sound rises quickly, sharp against the night. One pushes the other, and the crew moves fast to pull them apart. Their hands grip shoulders, voices low, trying not to wake the rest of the ship. The fight fizzles as quickly as it began, leaving only a tense silence. A curious superstition floats among sailors' tales. It was said that spilling rum at sea angered the spirits of drowned men. The liquid belonged to them once it touched the deck. That is why some pirates, after a brawl, would pour a few drops over the side to pay the sea. You watch one of them do it now, tilting the bottle slightly and whispering into the dark water. The wind carries the smell of rum across the deck, mixing with the salt air. Somewhere below, a few men stir in their hammocks, muttering in their sleep. Maybe they are dreaming of taverns, firelight and soft beds. Maybe they dream of warmth that never ends. You can almost see it through their eyes. A wooden table, candles dripping wax, laughter echoing without fear of frost. The bottle comes back around to you. You lift it to your lips. The taste is harsh but alive. It burns for a moment, then fades, leaving behind the strange comfort of something shared. The cold is still here, pressing at your face, creeping into your fingers, but it feels softer now, as if it has agreed to wait its turn. Above you, the sails snap once, and the ship tilts gently. The rum settles in your stomach like a small ember, not enough to chase the cold away, but enough to remind you you're still here. Around you, the pirates laugh again, their voices slow and rough, and for a fleeting hour, the coldest night at sea feels almost human. The rum is gone by dawn, leaving the air thick with the smell of salt, smoke, and tired laughter. The pirates have gone quiet again, their voices fading into whispers as the cold returns. You watch them settle into their corners, pulling their blankets close, their eyelids heavy but restless. Sleep comes differently at sea. It is not rest so much as retreat, a thin layer between exhaustion and memory. You lean against a wooden beam, feeling the ship move under you. It sways gently, like breathing. Around you, the men drift into uneasy slumber. Their faces soften, their bodies curling inward. The sound of the sea blends with their slow, uneven breathing. Somewhere above, the ropes knock softly against the mast, a rhythm that feels almost deliberate, almost kind. It is written in the letters of captured sailors that pirates often dreamed of land. They spoke of beaches, fires, and soft beds, as if they were miracles. Some claimed to see gold even in their sleep, coins spilling from invisible chests, only to vanish when they reached for them. You imagine the frustration of that, the longing turned into nightmare. The colder the sea, the sweeter the dream. A curious glimpse into pirate superstition appears in an old ballad. It was said that a man who dreamed of fire during winter would not live to see spring. Flames in dreams were omens of fever, storms, or battle. The men joked about it sometimes, but you can sense that they half believed it. When warmth is a luxury, even imagined fire becomes dangerous. You watch as one man turns in his hammock, mumbling softly. His lips form the shape of a word that sounds like home. He is probably from somewhere green, somewhere with trees and smoke curling from a hearth. The others shift, grunting or sighing, tangled in their hammocks like fish caught in nets. The ship rocks, and the hammocks sway in answer. It looks almost peaceful. From a historian's point of view, dreams were one of the few escapes available to sailors. Diaries from the 15th century mention recurring visions among crews who spent too long at sea. They dreamed of soundless lands, of walking on solid ground that never moved, of hearing birds instead of waves. For pirates, whose lives were built on danger and constant movement, these dreams might have felt like heaven. You close your eyes for a moment and try to imagine their inner world. The smell of the ocean seeps even into dreams. The motion of the ship never truly fades. Even in sleep, the sea remains. You might find yourself walking through a market, yet the ground tilts beneath your feet. You might see a face from childhood, only for it to dissolve into the shape of a wave. The mind, it seems, never lets go of the ocean once it takes hold. Experts today still discuss whether the isolation of long voyages caused shared hallucinations among sailors. Some say the monotony and malnutrition warped their perception of reality. Others believe that the endless rhythm of waves acted like hypnosis, pulling their minds into a state between waking and dreaming. Whatever the cause, the sea had a way of invading their sleep. The pirates around you shift again. A man laughs softly in his dream. Another curses. Somewhere, someone snores so loudly that a few others chuckle in their sleep before falling still. The warmth of their bodies fills the air with a faint mist. The lantern light flickers across the ceiling, throwing gentle waves of gold that rise and fall with the ship's motion. You remember that many pirates were once ordinary sailors, merchants, or fishermen who had known land well before the sea claimed them. Perhaps their dreams were fragments of that other life, still echoing in the dark. A house by a harbour, a woman's voice, the smell of bread. For all their roughness, pirates were human first, and the night reminded them of it. One fascinating account from a prisoner's testimony describes a pirate who refused to sleep below deck, saying he could not bear to dream of dry land. He slept on the open deck instead, wrapped in sailcloth, his face to the stars. The others mocked him, calling him ghost lover, but he said it helped him remember he was free. The testimony ends with his disappearance at sea a few weeks later. You listen now to the sea outside. It whispers against the hull like a voice too distant to understand. It sounds almost tender. Perhaps that is why pirates came to love and hate it equally. It took their freedom and their peace, gave them riches and death in the same breath. In their dreams, they might have tried to make peace with it, to tame it for a few hours before waking. A small, almost forgotten detail from a ship's log mentions that some crews encourage storytelling before sleep. It was a way to guide dreams, to shape what the mind would see. The stories were simple, sometimes about gold, sometimes about food, but they worked. Men slept better after imagining something worth surviving for. You can feel that rhythm in the room now, the murmured breathing, the creak of hammocks, the sigh of the sea. It feels ancient, almost sacred. The dreams drifting through this ship are not peaceful, but they are alive. They carry warmth that no fire can give, the warmth of memory, of something human still glowing beneath the cold. You look up. The lantern light dances across the beams, and for a fleeting moment, you imagine the ship dreaming with them. Its creaks are whispers, its sway a heartbeat. Maybe even the wood remembers the warmth of the sun long gone. And as you stand there, surrounded by sleeping men and their fragile dreams, the cold outside feels less cruel. The next day begins with a dull grey light, heavy clouds hiding the horizon. The cold bites even before you open your eyes fully. The ship groans softly under your feet, every timber stiff from frost. The smell of salted meat lingers in the air, and somewhere nearby, a pan clatters. It is time for the morning meal, though calling it that feels generous. You follow the sound into the galley. A few men gather around a small table, heads bowed, hands cupped around tin plates. The food looks as tired as they do. Hardtack biscuits chipped like stone, strips of salted beef that glisten with oil, and a pot of grey stew that smells faintly of brine and smoke. The air feels damp and close, filled with the aroma of boiled fat and wet wool. Old seafaring records tell us that pirates, like other sailors of their time, survived on rations meant to last months. The meat was packed in barrels of salt, so strong that men often had to soak it overnight before cooking. Bread turned to rock within weeks. If a biscuit broke your tooth, no one was surprised. They called it ship's bread, though it was closer to punishment. You watch one man try to chew through a piece of beef, his jaw working slowly. He grunts, swallows, then laughs without humor. "Better than snow," he mutters. Another scoops stew into a tin cup, the liquid pale and thin. You can smell the salt from where you stand. A curious little detail from ship life reveals that some pirates used their rum to soften the hardtack. They would soak the biscuits until they crumbled, then mix them with sugar or molasses if they had any. It turned into a kind of porridge, sweet and thick, a rare comfort in the biting cold. You can almost taste it now, sweet and bitter at once, the warmth spreading just enough to remind you what comfort feels like. The cook stirs his pot with a wooden ladle, his hands red from cold. He hums softly under his breath, an old song from some port you will never see. The melody winds through the air, mingling with the clink of spoons and the creak of the ship. The pirates eat in silence, the kind born of exhaustion rather than manners. There are no fresh vegetables, no fruit, no bread that still bends. The men's lips are cracked, their faces pale. Some show the first signs of scurvy, bleeding gums, slow movements, eyes dull with fatigue. The sea takes its toll slowly, without mercy. They chew, swallow, and stare at nothing. The act of eating feels more like survival than satisfaction. Researchers have found records of inventive cooks who tried to keep spirits up with strange recipes. Some mixed crushed biscuits with seawater and grease to make something like dumplings. Others used powdered mustard to hide the taste of rot. It was creativity born of desperation. Pirates were not chefs, but they were stubborn. Anything edible became a meal. The man beside you holds out a plate of stew and gestures for you to sit. You take it, feeling the warmth seep into your fingers through the metal. The broth tastes of salt and smoke, thin but alive. You can feel it travel down your throat, warming a little piece of you the cold had forgotten. Around you, spoons scrape plates. For a few minutes, the only sound is eating. An argument begins at the far end of the table. Two men grumble over who gets the last bit of dried fruit. Their voices rise, but no one else interferes. Hunger sharpens tempers more than rum ever could. Finally, the cook slams his ladle against the pot, and the noise echoes through the galley. The fight stops. The silence that follows is heavy but short-lived. The rhythm of eating resumes, slower now, quieter. A strange fact from a 14th century travel account mentions that sailors sometimes kept small cloth bags filled with aromatic herbs or citrus peel when available. They would sniff these during meals to mask the stench of spoiled food. You picture a pirate lifting such a charm to his nose while pretending the stew in front of him tastes like roasted lamb. It is both ridiculous and deeply human. The air thickens with the smell of smoke as the last coals in the hearth fade. Someone coughs, someone else belches, then laughs. The sound ripples through the room like a spark. It reminds everyone that they are still alive, still together. Outside, the wind howls again, rattling the ship's sides. The men finish quickly, wiping their mouths on sleeves or old rags. Some save crumbs in small pouches just in case. Others lick their fingers clean, unwilling to waste even a grain of salt. The cook begins to scrub his pot with sand and seawater, humming the same tune. Historians today still question how pirates managed morale on such meager diets. Some argue that shared meals built unity, a kind of ritual that reminded them they were not alone. Others think the monotony of food worsened discipline, feeding mutiny as much as hunger. Both ideas might be true. The galley was the ship's heart, both comfort and battlefield. You linger for a moment longer. The table is empty now, the plates stacked neatly. The smell of salted beef clings to the air. You glance around and see the faces of men hardened by necessity, their eyes dulled by cold but still alert. The sea may strip away softness, but it never fully takes the will to live. As you turn to leave, the cook pours the last of the warm water into a small cup and offers it to you. His hand trembles slightly. "For luck," he says. You take it, the warmth seeping into your palms. The taste is plain, just salt and metal, but it feels sacred somehow. On this frozen ship, every bit of heat is a blessing, and every meal, no matter how poor, is a small act of defiance. The cold grows sharper as the days pass, a creeping presence that slides into every seam of the ship. The ocean itself begins to change. The water darkens until it looks like black glass, and the wind cuts with a high, whining note. You pull your collar higher and watch as flakes of snow drift lazily down, settling on the deck before vanishing into tiny beads of water. The pirates move slower now. Their boots crunch on the frozen planks. They speak little, saving their breath for work. The sails hang stiff, patched with frost, and the ropes sparkle faintly in the pale light. Each line looks beautiful, like crystal threads spun across the masts. But you know that beauty hides danger. Ice adds weight, and weight breaks ships. Historical accounts of northern voyages tell of sailors forced to climb frozen rigging with knives between their teeth, hacking away at ice before it could pull the mast down. You can almost see it now, a man halfway up the main mast, his fingers bleeding as he chips away at the glittering frost. The wind shrieks through the ropes, and the sea below looks solid enough to walk on. A strange note found in a merchant's logbook mentions that during one particularly brutal winter, sailors used iron mallets to smash the ice off their sails, singing loudly so they would not notice their fingers going numb. Their laughter froze in the air before it disappeared. You imagine the sound, brittle and bright, carried away by the wind like tiny shards of glass. The pirates on this ship are not far from that fate. They move across the deck with a kind of grim rhythm, breaking ice from the ropes, scraping the frozen planks with wooden mallets. One man leans close to the mast, breathing hard, his beard stiff with frost. He wipes it away, but the crystals return within moments. The sea sprays upward in bursts that freeze mid-air, coating everything in a thin white shell. Modern researchers have long debated whether pirates ever dared to sail this far north. Some argue that only desperate or lost crews would risk such waters, while others believe the lure of trade routes and unguarded cargo pulled them toward the edge of the world. Whatever the reason, their courage or madness brought them into places where even the sea seemed to turn against them. You grip the railing and look out. The ocean stretches flat and endless, a mirror of grey. Pieces of ice drift past like broken glass. They knock gently against the hull, a hollow, ringing sound that echoes through the planks. Somewhere far off you hear a cracking noise, deep and drawn out, like a sigh from the earth itself. The ice is shifting. The pirates hear it too. Their eyes flick toward the sound, wary. They know what it means. If the ship becomes trapped, the pressure could crush the hull in minutes. No storm, no battle, no fire compares to that slow, invisible death. You can almost feel the tension tighten in the air, a shared breath held too long. A curious detail from an old sea chronicle tells of sailors who learned to listen for the song of the ice. It was said that if you heard a high, whistling tone in the night, the ice was moving toward you. The sound meant danger, but also a kind of eerie beauty. Men described it as the sea singing in its sleep. You listen now, and for a moment you think you hear it too, a faint melodic hum beneath the wind. The pirates continue their work. One climbs into the rigging, swinging a small axe. Another drags a barrel across the deck to block a leak. Their faces are red with cold, eyes watering. No one speaks. The sound of wood cracking and tools striking fills the air. It feels like a ritual, harsh but necessary. Your breath fogs as you exhale. The frost forms on your lashes, turning the world into a blur of light and shadow. You wipe it away and catch sight of the helmsman, his hands clenched on the wheel. His gloves are stiff, his knuckles white. Every movement is careful. Even the smallest mistake could send the ship into an ice floe. The lanterns burn low, their light dimmed by frost on the glass. The deck glitters faintly, a frozen mosaic of salt and snow. You hear someone whisper a prayer, though you cannot make out the words. It sounds old, maybe older than the ship itself. Records from a 15th century Danish voyage describe how crews used oil-soaked rags to keep the ropes flexible during freezes. Pirates might have copied the trick, rubbing the lines with grease stolen from whalers or merchants. It must have smelled terrible, but it kept the ship alive. Even now, one man kneels near the bow, rubbing a thick black paste into the ropes. His hands shake, but he keeps working. The sky darkens quickly, the clouds sinking low until they touch the horizon. Snow begins to fall again, heavier this time, thick flakes swirling in the wind. The world fades into white. The sea and sky merge, leaving no sense of direction. The pirates stop for a moment, staring out into the blankness. You can feel their unease. Out here, the line between water and air disappears. One man laughs softly to himself, maybe to break the tension. "The sea's gone blind," he says. No one answers. The silence that follows feels heavier than the cold. You stand still, letting the flakes settle on your shoulders. The cold presses close, but the air is strangely peaceful. You can almost believe the world has stopped moving. The sound of the waves is gone, replaced by the faint crackle of ice forming on the hull. The pirates retreat below deck one by one, leaving you alone with the whispering snow. For a moment, you feel as they must have felt small, fragile, and completely at the mercy of the frozen world. The ship is alive beneath you, groaning softly, pushing forward through a sea that has turned to glass. Somewhere ahead, the horizon waits, hidden under layers of mist and ice, and you understand why sailors feared the northern routes more than any cannon. By the next night, the ship has grown eerily quiet. The wind has softened, but the cold feels sharper than ever, cutting straight through fabric and bone. The sea is calm, too calm, the waves small and slow, as though the ocean itself has frozen mid-breath. You walk carefully along the deck, hearing nothing but the creak of timbers underfoot and the faint rattle of a loose chain. Below deck, the stillness feels heavier. The lanterns burn low, their flames thin and trembling. The air carries a sour tang that turns your stomach. It is the smell of sickness, mixed with damp wood and salt. A man coughs in the shadows, the sound thick and wet. Another groans softly, rolling in his hammock. The rest try to sleep through it, though their eyes remain half open, dull and wary. Old maritime journals describe how illness was the true predator of the sea. Cold weather made it worse. Frostbite, scurvy, and fever stalked the lower decks as ruthlessly as any enemy ship. Once infection began, it spread fast through the cramped quarters. A single cough could travel faster than a cannonball. You kneel beside one of the sick men. His lips are cracked, his skin pale beneath a layer of sweat. He stares at the ceiling and mumbles a prayer you cannot quite catch. His fingers twitch as though grasping a rope that is no longer there. The air around him feels warmer than the rest of the room, heavy with fever. A curious practice mentioned in one physician's record tells of sailors rubbing vinegar on their hands and faces to ward off disease. They believed the sourness killed the invisible mists that carried illness. The pirates here may have tried the same, though the smell of decay in the air suggests it did little good. The vinegar burned, but it offered the illusion of control, and illusions were sometimes all they had. You move deeper into the shadows. A bucket sits near the bulkhead, half full of murky water. Someone has vomited into it recently. A rat darts across the floor, its fur sleek, its eyes bright. The pirates ignore it. Rats are companions here, both pests and protectors. They warn of rot, and they eat what men cannot bear to touch. From a modern perspective, historians note that pirates often suffered the same plagues as the naval fleets they hunted. Lack of fresh food led to scurvy. Damp clothes invited frostbite. Infection turned minor wounds into death sentences. Yet despite the misery, crews rarely complained openly. To show weakness at sea was to invite mutiny or abandonment. The sick were cared for only as long as they were useful. You glance toward the corner where one man sits awake, sharpening a knife in slow, deliberate strokes. His eyes are distant, focused on nothing. Perhaps he sharpens it for comfort, perhaps for fear. The sound of metal scraping against stone fills the silence like a heartbeat. He pauses only to take a drink from a flask, then continues. The sick man beside him stares at the motion as if hypnotized. A whisper spreads among the crew that the fever has taken 3 men already. One was thrown overboard without ceremony, wrapped in a canvas shroud. They say his body froze before it sank. The others lie below, too weak to move. The living step carefully between them, pretending not to notice. In this kind of cold, grief has no energy to burn. Researchers still discuss whether pirates practiced any form of quarantine. Some argue that they pushed the ill aside, keeping them near the hold. Others suggest a rough compassion, with men sharing their rum or covering a comrade with an extra blanket. The truth likely depended on the crew, and on how close death already stood. You feel a shiver run through the floor as a wave bumps the hull. The lantern sways, casting brief shadows across the sleeping men. Their faces flicker between peace and pain. One mutters for water, another calls for a mother long dead. You realize that this darkness holds more than just night. It holds every fear that thrives when warmth runs out. There is an entry in a 15th century sailor's journal that describes this same hush, calling it the silence before the sea takes her due. The writer said the crew stopped singing, stopped arguing, stopped even laughing. The only sound was breathing, slow and careful, as if noise itself could invite disaster. That silence is here now, pressing on your ears until it feels almost physical. The ship sways again, and somewhere above, a gull cries a lonely, distant sound. It fades quickly, leaving only the creak of the hull. You think about how fragile this floating world really is. A few inches of wood separate life from the freezing water. The men below cling to that wood as if their faith alone keeps it from splintering. You take a deep breath, but the air tastes stale. The cold finds its way into your lungs, sharp and clean, as if to remind you how thin the line between breathing and choking can be. You look once more at the sick men, their faces slick with fever. One has fallen silent completely. A companion checks him with 2 fingers against his neck, then covers his face with a rag. No one speaks. The work of living continues. Above, the ship rolls onward, indifferent to the loss. The cold does not pity, and the sea does not pause. Yet somehow, in the dim light and stifling air, you feel the heartbeat of humanity still pulsing. Each cough, each breath, each small act of care keeps the dark from swallowing everything. Morning returns with a pale sky, and a silence that feels uneasy. The ship drifts through the grey water, slow and heavy. You step carefully along the deck, where a thin crust of frost crunches beneath your boots. The cold bites at your fingers even through the gloves. Most of the pirates are awake already, moving stiffly, speaking in low voices. The sickness still lingers below deck, but life must continue above it. A soft sound catches your ear, a faint, delicate meow. You turn and see a small, wiry cat slinking along the railing. Its fur is mottled grey, its tail flicking lazily. The sight feels out of place among the worn boots and frozen ropes, yet it moves with the calm confidence of something that belongs here. One of the pirates kneels and offers it a scrap of dried fish. The cat sniffs, then accepts, purring faintly. It surprises many to learn that cats were prized aboard ships long before pirates made them famous. Maritime records from the Middle Ages mention cats as essential crew members, guardians against rats that could chew through food stores or ropes. They kept vermin away, and perhaps more importantly, lifted spirits in the darkest weather. You watch the small creature wind between the men's legs, brushing against their boots. A pirate with frost in his beard reaches down and lets it climb onto his shoulder. The others grin, the moment softening the hard lines on their faces. The cat curls there contentedly, its tail wrapped around his neck like a scarf, a small comfort in a vast, cold world. A curious story found in a 16th century sailor's letter claims that ships' cats were sometimes believed to control the wind. If a cat sneezed, a storm was coming. If it washed behind its ears, the breeze would rise. Sailors treated them with deep respect, and harming one was said to bring ruin to the voyage. You can imagine the superstition settling deep in the men's bones, half belief, half insurance against fear. The cat leaps down and prowls toward a coil of rope, sniffing at it before curling up in a small, perfect circle. Its quiet purr fills the stillness. You realize that even a sound so small can make the ship feel less empty. But cats were not the only comforts on board. Between the coils of rope and barrels of salted food, you find small signs of humanity tucked away. A piece of cloth with stitching shaped like a flower, a crude wooden carving of a woman's face, a seashell tied to a nail. These little things mean more than gold here. Each one is a reminder of land, of warmth, of something worth returning to. One pirate sits near the mast, sharpening a knife with slow, careful motions. Around his neck hangs a charm made from a piece of colored glass. It catches the faint sunlight and scatters it across his hands. He notices you looking and shrugs. "Keeps the cold away," he says with a half smile. The charm might not hold heat, but it holds faith, and that is enough. The wind shifts slightly, carrying the smell of salt and tar. The men move about their work with quiet precision. Some patch sails, others scrape frost from the planks. The cat follows them from task to task, as if overseeing the crew. Occasionally, one of them pauses to scratch its back, earning a grateful purr. The sound feels almost like laughter in a place where laughter has grown scarce. A note from an old chronicler describes how sailors believed animals sensed danger before humans did. Cats, dogs, even birds were watched closely for signs of trouble. When a cat flattened its ears or hissed at nothing, the crew took it as a warning. Looking at this small creature now, you can understand why. It moves with purpose, its eyes bright, as though reading messages in the wind no man can hear. One of the younger pirates kneels beside the cat, whispering something. You cannot hear the words, but his tone is gentle. He scratches behind its ears, then slips it a small piece of dried meat from his pocket. For a moment, he smiles like a boy, his shoulders relaxing. The cold, the sickness, the endless grey sea, all of it fades in that small exchange. Even modern historians admit that companionship played a crucial role in surviving long voyages. Without warmth or comfort, men lost their minds as easily as their fingers to frostbite. Shared jokes, small rituals, and animals like this cat became anchors for sanity. They reminded the crew that life was still worth protecting, even in misery. You look around and notice other traces of care. Someone has mended a torn blanket with surprising precision, using thread dyed red. Another has carved initials into the mast, perhaps his own or someone he left behind. These fragments of gentleness feel fragile, but they are stubborn too. They refuse to vanish, no matter how fierce the sea becomes. The cat stretches and yawns, then climbs up to a beam where it can watch the men below. Its tail sways lazily as it settles into a patch of weak sunlight. The pirates glance up at it from time to time, as if its calm is contagious. Even the sick below deck might sleep easier, knowing it is still there, alive and watching. You take one last look at the small animal before turning toward the horizon. The wind has shifted again, colder now, carrying a thin mist across the deck. The cat lifts its head briefly, then curls back into sleep, unbothered. There is something reassuring in that. If a creature so small can find peace here, perhaps the men can too, if only for a little while. The sky brightens slightly, the color of pale silver. The ship continues forward, steady despite the ice and wind. Below deck, the coughing fades for now. Above, the cat dreams in the sunlight, and the pirates work quietly, bound together by exhaustion, superstition, and the faint, stubborn warmth of their small comforts. You push open the door to the captain's quarters, half expecting warmth and grandeur, but what greets you is another pocket of cold air, tinged with the smell of damp wood and lamp oil. The cabin is small, more a narrow box than a room, with a single lantern hanging from a beam that groans each time the ship moves. The light spills over a desk cluttered with maps, scraps of parchment, and a cracked compass. The captain sits hunched over the desk, his coat heavy, his shoulders curved like a man who carries more than the weight of frost. His hands, rough and scarred, rest beside an open book. You cannot see what he writes, but you hear the soft scratch of a quill on paper, steady and deliberate. The sound is almost comforting. Captains in the age of sail often had the illusion of privilege, but in truth, their cabins offered little more than privacy. Historical logs from 15th century voyages describe rooms like this, cramped, draughty, and filled with the groan of timbers. The captain slept alone, yes, but he was never free from the sea's reach. The cold slid in through every crack, and the noise never stopped. You take a step closer. The light catches his face. He looks older than he likely is, eyes sunk deep beneath dark circles. A faint line of frost glitters in his beard where his breath has frozen. He glances up, nods once, then returns to his writing. The expression is not unkind, just tired, bone-tired, in the way only those who have led men through storms can understand. On the table beside him sits a half-empty bottle and a single pewter cup. The smell of rum hangs faintly in the air. Next to it lies a pistol, polished but worn, and a folded handkerchief embroidered with initials now faded, almost invisible. You sense that the handkerchief belonged to someone else, someone left behind. A curious entry in a captured pirate's journal describes how captains often wrote at night to calm their thoughts. Some kept ledgers of loot and supplies, others recorded dreams, regrets, or prayers. A few even wrote letters they would never send. It was their only way to speak honestly when surrounded by men who worshipped bravado. You look at the bed against the wall. It is little more than a wooden frame with a mattress stuffed with straw. The blanket is thick but worn, patched with mismatched fabric. A lantern hangs nearby, its glow too weak to warm the air. The pillow looks damp from condensation. So much for luxury. The captain sleeps no better than his crew. He sighs quietly, setting the quill aside. His hands tremble slightly as he flexes his fingers, stiff from cold. Then, as if remembering something, he opens a small box beside the desk. Inside are coins, bits of metal, and a single locket. He opens it briefly, revealing the miniature painting of a woman's face, her expression serene. He looks at it for a long moment before closing the lid. There is a detail in one sailor's testimony about how captains hid tokens like that, not for sentiment alone, but for sanity. Leadership at sea was isolation in its purest form. Every decision could mean life or death, and mistakes left marks that never healed. The locket, the drink, the diary, all small defenses against guilt. The ship shifts, groaning as the hull scrapes ice. The lantern swings, sending light across the walls. You notice carvings etched into the wood, marks of storms survived perhaps, or ports visited. One shape stands out, a rough cross, cut deep into the grain. It looks newer than the rest. Maybe a memorial, maybe a plea. The captain glances at it, then looks away quickly. A gust of wind rattles the small window. He stands, adjusts his coat, and looks outside. His reflection in the glass looks like a ghost trapped behind the frost. The sea is dark, and flakes of snow cling to the edges of the window pane. He breathes out, fogging the glass, then wipes it with his sleeve. The motion is automatic, almost tender. Modern historians still wonder how captains balanced authority with humanity on such ships. Some believe they ruled with cruelty to keep order, while others argue that compassion was the only way to survive in such close quarters. The truth likely shifted from man to man, storm to storm. This captain seems quiet, steady, but the silence around him carries its own kind of weight. He moves toward the bed and sits, rubbing his temples. His pistol remains within reach, gleaming faintly in the light. You sense that he sleeps lightly, if at all. Perhaps every creak of the ship wakes him. Perhaps he dreams of mutiny or the faces of those who never return from raids. In one of the old chronicles, a captured sailor wrote that a captain's sleep is a coin flipped by the sea. If the night is calm, he might rest. If not, he lies awake, listening to the water whispering around the hull, counting every sound that could mean danger. You imagine that now the steady rhythm of the sea outside, the quiet pulse of guilt inside. He finally stretches out on the bed, pulling the blanket around him. The lantern's glow softens, and the room seems to shrink. His breathing slows, though his eyes remain open a moment longer. Outside, the wind hums low, pressing against the glass. You linger in the doorway, watching him settle. There is no grandeur here, no romance of piracy, only a man who bears too much silence. He closes his eyes at last, and the lantern flickers once before steadying. The ship creaks like an old lullaby. For all the chaos above deck, this small cabin holds a fragile calm. The captain sleeps alone, but not peacefully. The cold keeps watch with him, whispering softly through the cracks, reminding him of everything he has gained and lost. Night falls again, thick and silent. The lanterns on deck burn low, their light rippling across the wet wood like trembling stars. You move slowly through the corridor toward the crew's quarters. The air feels heavier than before, charged with something unspoken. Down here, sleep no longer comes easily. The cold has crept into their tempers. The men lie in their hammocks, faces half hidden in the dim light. A few whisper to each other, voices sharp and hurried. Others stare upward at the beams, eyes wide open. The ship groans softly, a sound that might be mistaken for breathing. Somewhere, a bottle rolls and clinks. Someone curses under their breath. From countless old ship logs, we know that tension thrived on long voyages. Hunger, frost, exhaustion, and fear built slowly until they burst. Pirates were no exception. They lacked the discipline of navies, but they understood anger all too well. When warmth and food ran thin, words became weapons. You move closer to one cluster of hammocks where 3 men are speaking in low tones. Their voices are thick with drink and resentment. He keeps the best rations for himself, one says. The captain eats soft bread while we chew salt. Another mutters something about the sick being thrown overboard too soon. Their words coil through the air like smoke, quiet but poisonous. A small detail found in an intercepted pirate letter mentions that captains often slept with weapons close at hand, not because of battles at sea but because of mutiny in the dark. Men driven by cold and hunger could forget loyalty in a heartbeat. You look at these faces and wonder which ones are still loyal and which ones are already plotting. A sudden thud echoes from the far corner as a man drops from his hammock. He sways slightly before standing. His eyes glint in the half-light. "Keep your mouth shut," he growls. No one answers. The tension thickens. You feel it settle on your skin like frost. Modern scholars who study maritime life still argue about what truly fueled mutinies. Some say greed for loot, others insist it was despair. But here, in the biting cold of endless nights, despair feels like the more dangerous enemy. Greed needs planning. Misery needs only silence. The standing pirate finally moves away, his footsteps heavy on the boards. The others watch him leave, saying nothing. Then one whispers, "He'll snap soon." They share a short laugh, the kind that carries no humor. You realize they all fear each other now. Sleep has turned from refuge to risk. The lantern flickers, making shadows lurch across the walls. The ship sways gently, but the mood inside stays sharp and brittle. Even the cat, curled in a corner, keeps its eyes open. Its ears twitch with every sound. The men try to settle again, pulling blankets tighter, turning their backs to one another. A curious fact from a 15th century trial record describes a mutiny that began over a blanket. One man took another's during a freezing night. By morning, blood stained the deck. The court called it madness born of cold. Reading that, you understand how easily these nights could end the same way. You glance at one pirate near the door. He holds a knife, not drawn but ready. His hand rests lightly on the hilt even as his eyes close. Around him, others shift uneasily, pretending not to notice. Trust has frozen, like the sea outside. The smell of sweat and smoke thickens the air. Someone mutters a prayer in a foreign tongue. Another spits into the corner. The quiet hum of the ship feels too loud now. Every creak an accusation. You realize how fragile this peace really is. There is an account written by a monk who sailed with privateers that claims, "The sea is the greatest judge, for she listens before she punishes." He wrote that after surviving a night when his crewmates turned on one another midwinter. The survivors swore they heard laughter in the waves afterward. Whether true or not, the story clings to the air now like salt mist. You take a slow breath. The lantern sputters. Somewhere above, the wind rises again, rattling the rigging. The sound breaks the tension slightly, drawing every eye upward. The cold is returning, seeping back through the wood. Perhaps that is enough to remind them that the real enemy is outside. For now. A voice from the corner speaks suddenly, calm but firm. "Sleep while you can. Morning will judge what we say tonight." The others fall silent. No one argues. The ship creaks once more, a sound like an old sigh. Gradually, the whispers fade. One by one, the men drift toward uneasy rest. The knife stays close, the mistrust closer. Above them, the sea groans, moving under a sky too heavy for stars. You watch the shadows breathe in and out, knowing that peace here lasts only as long as the cold allows it. The next morning arrives with a dim, bluish light that seems to seep through every crack in the ship. The frost still clings to the ropes, glittering faintly in the dawn, but the air feels oddly still. You step onto the deck, your breath clouding in front of you. The sea is quiet again, a pale mirror stretching to the horizon. The pirates move like ghosts, silent and slow, their faces drawn tight with fatigue. The cold has settled deep into their bones now, but they have learned to fight it in their own strange ways. You notice how they move in pairs or small groups, working close together, sharing what little warmth they can. A man tightens the rigging while another stands shoulder to shoulder with him, their movements synchronized. No one speaks, yet there is a rhythm in their silence, a small defiance against the cold. Records from a northern trade ship of the 14th century mention that sailors often slept in clusters during the coldest nights, pressing close under shared blankets. It was not sentiment but survival. The human body produces more heat than any lantern or brazier. The pirates on this ship have discovered the same truth. You watch as two men lean against the mast, wrapped together in a single tattered cloak. Their eyes are closed, breathing slow and steady, their bodies swaying with the ship's movement. Another small group sits on the deck, passing a flask back and forth, their shoulders touching. The cold is still there, sharp and merciless, but they have learned how to soften it with closeness. A curious entry in a 15th century sailor's diary describes a practice called back sleeping. Two men would lie facing opposite directions, backs pressed together, sharing heat through the night. It was considered practical, not intimate. Yet in these conditions, every small gesture carried meaning. You can almost see it now. Rough faces, tired eyes, silent gratitude in the shared warmth. The ship rolls slightly, and one of the men laughs quietly. It is the first sound of joy you have heard in hours. He reaches out to steady his friend, and for a brief moment, the air feels almost light again. Even in the coldest corners of the world, companionship finds a way to survive. Experts still discuss how much cooperation existed among pirate crews compared to naval fleets. Some suggest that the lack of hierarchy forced men to rely on each other more deeply, while others claim constant tension made true friendship impossible. Watching them now, you can tell that both ideas hold some truth. The sea teaches cooperation, but it never forgets danger. You walk toward the bow, where a young pirate sits cross-legged beside a small wooden box. He opens it carefully, revealing a handful of coals glowing faintly inside. The heat barely reaches his hands, yet he smiles as though it were a roaring fire. Two others kneel beside him, holding their palms close. Their breath fogs the air, their faces lit by the faint red glow. One of them hums an old tune. You remember reading that some crews passed small ember boxes like this between shifts. The coals would be covered in ash and carried from man to man, a fragile gift of warmth. If the fire died, it was said to bring bad luck, as if the ship itself had lost its heartbeat. You can feel that belief here, in the reverence with which they handle the box. The wind stirs again, and the cold rushes back. A few men stamp their feet, others pull scarves tighter around their faces. Yet instead of retreating to their hammocks, they stay together. One wraps an arm around another's shoulders. A third adjusts a blanket to cover both of them. These small acts repeat across the deck like quiet prayers. The cat appears, leaping from a barrel and weaving through their legs. It purrs softly, brushing against their boots. Someone laughs and scoops it up, tucking it under his coat. The animal wriggles once, then settles, content. It is another kind of shared heat, a heartbeat against a heartbeat. A curious note from a 16th century chronicler describes how sailors learned to sleep in rhythm with the ship. When the vessel rocked one way, they leaned into it together, conserving strength and staying warm through shared motion. You can see that rhythm now, a slow, unconscious dance between man and sea. The captain appears for a moment, his face pale under the morning light. He scans the deck, watching his men huddle together. Perhaps he understands what he sees. Perhaps he remembers when he too slept shoulder to shoulder with the crew before command set him apart. He nods once, almost imperceptibly, then retreats to his cabin again. The men resume their work. They haul lines, scrape frost, adjust the sails. Their movements remain slow, but there is purpose now, and even a hint of energy. Each touch, each shared breath, keeps the cold from winning completely. It is not the fire that keeps them alive, but the network of quiet, stubborn warmth passing from one body to another. You stand at the edge of the deck, watching your breath swirl away in the thin air. The horizon has softened, the sky glowing faintly pink, as if the sun is trying to remember its strength. The pirates keep working, still close, still silent, still human. As the wind rises again, the ship seems to groan in approval, its old bones creaking beneath their feet. Together, they push through another morning. No warmth lasts forever here, but for now, it is enough. The shared heat, the small laughter, the steady rhythm of hands working in unison, all of it reminds you that survival, even in the cruelest cold, is rarely a solitary thing. The night deepens, and with it, the sea becomes a vast mirror of ink. The ship drifts quietly through the dark, its sails heavy with frost. You can hear the slow groan of wood and the hiss of water along the hull. The cold presses close, but the stillness is heavier than the temperature. It is the kind of silence that invites imagination. The men whisper softly, their words barely reaching beyond their hammocks. Every sound feels amplified here, the rattle of a chain, the sigh of the wind, a cough that echoes too long. Someone mutters about the sky, about how the stars look too bright tonight, how they shine like eyes watching from above. The others shush him quickly. No one likes that kind of talk when the sea listens so closely. Old maritime folklore describes how sailors filled the darkness with stories. It kept the fear from growing too large. Superstition was their armor, and the night was always full of omens. You can almost hear the stories now, whispered in voices rough from rum and cold. Ghost ships that sail without crew, mermaids that hum to lure men overboard. A shadow that walks the deck before death visits the next dawn. A curious note in a medieval sea journal tells of pirates who refused to whistle after sunset, believing it would summon storms. Another record mentions that no one dared to point at the moon while at sea, for fear of drawing bad luck. You watch as one man looks up, but quickly lowers his gaze, pretending he was never staring. The fear is not loud here, but it is deep, woven into habit. The cat lifts its head from the captain's chair, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. A few of the men nod to it, as though acknowledging a silent guardian. For all their roughness, they cling to signs of protection wherever they can find them, a bit of faith against a world that offers none. The ship creaks again, and someone whispers a prayer, not to God, but to the sea itself. "Be kind tonight," he says quietly. No one mocks him. Every man here understands the sentiment. Historians often write about the violence of pirates, but they rarely mention their fear of the supernatural. For men who lived without certainty, the boundary between life and myth was thin. Some believed the sea had moods, that it could love or hate them depending on how they behaved. You can almost feel that belief pulsing through the planks beneath your feet. A faint light flickers outside the port window, distant but moving. The men notice it too. One sits up, squinting. "Ship," he says under his breath. Another shakes his head. "Too small." The light drifts closer, then vanishes completely. A ripple of unease runs through the room. Someone mutters that it was a lantern carried by spirits, a sign that another soul will be taken before morning. In an old chronicle of Baltic sailors, there is mention of the dead lantern, a flicker of light said to appear before a death at sea. Some swore it was the reflection of Street Elmo's fire, a natural glow born of electricity. Others said it was something older, a messenger from the deep. Scientists today speak of plasma, of physics and ionized air. But standing here, surrounded by anxious faces, the explanation feels less comforting than the legend. One man rises from his hammock and spits on the floor, a ritual meant to break bad luck. Another scratches across into the wood with a knife tip. The sound of the blade is sharp and final. They settle again, though none truly relax. Their breaths rise in small clouds, steady but too fast. You look up at the ceiling, where the lantern's flame trembles with every movement of the ship. Shadows ripple across the beams like waves. The pirates watch them too, as if half expecting one to move differently, to separate and take shape. A detail from an early navigator's logbook describes how men sometimes heard voices during the stillest nights, whispers woven into the sound of the wind. Some believed they were lost sailors calling for help. Others said it was the sea repeating every word ever spoken aboard her. You pause now, listening. The wind slides through the cracks, and for a moment you think you hear something softer beneath it, like the murmur of words in another language. The youngest pirate sits up, clutching a piece of cloth around his shoulders. "Do you hear it?" he whispers. No one answers. The others keep their eyes closed, pretending they are already asleep. Pretending is often the only defense left. You glance toward the cat again. It is sitting upright now, staring at the same spot where the light appeared earlier. Its tail flicks once. A shiver passes through the room. The man nearest the door stands abruptly and throws a handful of salt onto the floor. "For peace," he says. The others nod, grateful for the excuse to move, to do something. Modern scholars continue to debate how much sailors actually believed in these omens, and how much they used them to make sense of fear. It is easy to dismiss such tales from the comfort of land, but here, where darkness feels alive, reason bends quickly. The lantern dims, its flame shrinking low. The men lie still again. Outside, the wind hums a single note, that seems to circle the ship. You close your eyes and let the sound wash through you. The fear is not sharp now, only steady, familiar, almost gentle. It wraps around you like the sea's own lullaby. In the quiet that follows, the ship drifts onward through the black water. The stories fade into silence, but their shapes remain, curled like smoke above the hammocks. Every sailor here carries a superstition close to his heart, a charm against the unknown. And tonight, as the sea whispers around you, you understand why. Some darkness can only be endured by giving it a name. The night sky clears, and with it comes a sight so strange that the men forget their fear for a moment. You step onto the deck and look upward. The darkness has softened into a deep indigo, and across it stretch ribbons of light, green and gold, shifting like silk in invisible wind. The northern lights shimmer above the frozen sea. The pirates stand scattered across the deck, their faces tilted toward the sky. No one speaks at first. Even the wind has gone quiet, as if the world itself is listening. The lights ripple and twist, reflecting off the ice floating beside the ship. For a moment, the entire vessel seems to glow. Travelers of the northern oceans recorded these lights for centuries, describing them as spirits, omens, or fire in the heavens. Mariners who had no knowledge of magnetism or solar winds gave them names instead: ghost fires, angels dancing, sky serpents. To those who lived by the sea, they were both beautiful and terrifying. You can feel why. The lights move with a kind of purpose, too graceful to seem natural. A pirate near you crosses himself, whispering a prayer. Another laughs softly, pretending not to care, but his voice trembles. In the glow, his eyes gleam like wet stones. One curious account, written by a Hanseatic merchant in the 1400s, describes sailors falling to their knees when they first saw the aurora. He wrote that the heavens opened and burned like oil upon water. It must have felt like a message from the divine, or perhaps a warning. Here, under this same cold sky, you can understand both reactions. The lights continue to shift, stretching across the horizon like rivers of living flame. The ice on the rigging glows faintly, and the sails, stiff with frost, shine in pale colors. The ship itself seems otherworldly, suspended between two worlds, one of earth and water, the other of sky and wonder. The pirates whisper now, voices hushed as if afraid to disturb the vision. "Maybe it's the souls of the dead," one says. Another replies, "or the treasure of heaven spilling out." A third simply watches, his breath shallow, eyes wide. Historians who study maritime folklore have written much about how sailors sought meaning in what they could not explain. For men who lived at the mercy of the elements, the sky was both guide and god. When it glowed with fire, it felt like revelation. Some wrote of hearing faint music under the lights, a sound like bells or distant singing. You tilt your head, listening. The wind hums softly, and for a fleeting moment, you think you hear something higher, lighter, almost melodic. The cat appears beside you, its fur lit green by the glow. It stares upward, tail twitching, as if the lights were prey. The sight makes the men laugh quietly. For a moment, the tension that has shadowed the ship seems to lift. The cold still bites, but no one feels it now. A sailor at the wheel whispers that this sight means good fortune, that no storm will come while the sky burns so bright. Another mutters the opposite, that the lights mark a boundary, the edge of the world, where the living should not sail. Both versions travel quickly across the deck, blending into one another until no one knows which to believe. A scholar of seafaring customs once suggested that belief itself was the only real protection sailors had. The lights could mean blessing or curse, but either way, they reminded men that the universe noticed them, that their small lives floated within something vast and alive. Watching now, you understand that sentiment completely. The lights begin to fade, their colors softening into white. The men sigh as if waking from a dream. One spits into the sea for luck. Another raises his flask. murmuring something about a drink for the angels. The air feels lighter, though colder, and their movements become slower again, as though reluctant to leave the magic behind. The captain steps from his cabin, his coat heavy with frost. He looks at the sky for a long moment, then turns to his men. "Enjoy it," he says quietly. "It will not last." His voice holds neither awe nor fear, only weary acceptance. He has seen too many wonders turn into warnings. Gradually, the glow fades from the sails. The sky darkens to its usual black, and the cold returns with full strength. The sea begins to move again, small waves bumping against the hull. The pirates shuffle back to their duties, still silent, still changed. You linger on deck, unable to look away from the horizon where the last traces of light flicker and vanish. The air feels sharper now, cleaner somehow, as if the world has been washed. The stars return, faint but steady. The ship creaks softly beneath your feet, a sound that feels familiar again after so much wonder. Below, the men will tell stories about this night for years. Some will say the lights were spirits guiding them through the ice. Others will claim they saw shapes in the glow faces, wings, cities of fire. Each version will carry a piece of truth, because what they felt was real, even if the cause remains mystery. You close your eyes and breathe in the frozen air. The memory of that color lingers behind your eyelids, bright and alive. The sea sighs softly against the hull. Above, the last spark of green fades into the stars, and the world returns to darkness. But for a little while, the pirates of this frozen ship have seen heaven touch the earth, and the sea for once feels almost kind. The sky is dark again, and the wonder of the lights has faded into the memory of cold work. The pirates have grown quieter. Their laughter, small as it was, has thinned away into mutters and sighs. You stand near the main mast, listening to the slow rhythm of the ship. Every groan of wood, every drip of water from the rigging seems to count time, steady and endless. Sleep has become more precious than gold now. Men take it in fragments, wherever they can find it. You watch one sailor slumped against a barrel, eyes half closed, his breath shallow. Another sits beside him, head nodding, hands still gripping a rope as if afraid to let go even in dreams. Their faces are pale with fatigue, the kind that seeps into the bones and makes thought itself heavy. Records from surviving logbooks often describe this kind of exhaustion. It was not simple tiredness, but a deep fog that dulled the senses. Men forgot names, stumbled over simple knots, or laughed at things that were not funny. Some whispered to shadows or argued with the wind. The line between waking and sleeping blurred until both felt the same. You move toward the hatch, looking below deck. The hammocks sway slowly, filled with bodies that hardly move. The air is heavy, still thick with the smell of tar and sweat. It feels almost sacred, as if every breath here is borrowed. Some men dream, some do not, and a few simply stare into nothing, their eyes open but unfocused. A curious report from a Danish merchant voyage speaks of the sleepless sickness, a condition brought on by cold, hunger, and fear. Sailors afflicted by it drifted in a half-conscious state, unable to rest yet unable to stay awake. Some claimed to see figures walking through the ship at night, quiet and watchful, though no one else ever saw them. You can imagine how such illusions might take root here, in the hum of endless night. One man near the door mumbles numbers under his breath, counting the creaks of the mast. He repeats the rhythm softly, as if the pattern itself keeps him sane. His hands twitch with each sound, his lips barely moving. A neighbor in the next hammock tells him to stop, but he does not hear. The counting becomes part of the ship's music. The historian who wrote about this voyage noted that sleeplessness was one of the cruelest punishments of sea life. When warmth and food could not be found, sleep was the only true escape, and even that was stolen by the motion of the waves or the moan of the wind. Here, you feel the truth of that. Each man seems caught between two worlds, neither resting nor living fully. The lanterns burn lower, the light fading into a soft orange glow. The shadows stretch across the beams, long and thin. A few men toss in their hammocks, their faces twitching as dreams flicker behind their eyes. You wonder what they see. Perhaps the shore, perhaps the faces of those they left behind. Or maybe nothing at all, just the colour of the sea pressed against the lids. A note from a 15th century surgeon's journal tells of sailors who dreamed only in shades of grey after months at sea. The endless water dulled their imagination. The same rhythm, the same sound, even in sleep. You feel that monotony here now, the slow erosion of colour from the mind. One man wakes suddenly, gasping. He sits up and grabs his chest. His breathing is ragged, eyes wide. The others stir but do not move to help. He mutters something about falling, about the sea pulling him under. Then he lies back down, trembling. Within moments, he is asleep again, or something close to it. The others watch him for a while, then close their eyes once more. Modern researchers have tried to explain these night terrors as a mix of exhaustion, malnutrition, and stress. The body becomes confused, dreaming before it has even fallen asleep. Yet out here, explanations do not ease the fear. When every creak might be the ocean calling your name, logic does not help much. You climb back to the deck, seeking air. The night wind stings your face. Frost glitters faintly along the railing. A few pirates stand guard, their eyes half shut but still alert. They sway with the motion of the ship, their balance perfect even in near sleep. You can tell they are fighting to stay awake. Their heads droop, then lift again. One hums softly to keep himself conscious. It is said that during the longest voyages, men could fall asleep standing up, bodies trained by necessity. Some captains punished them for it. Others looked the other way, knowing that exhaustion could not be commanded. You look at these men now and wonder how they will make it through another week of this frozen limbo. The sea sighs beneath the hull, a steady rhythm that could be comforting or maddening depending on the hour. The moon is low, casting a pale light over the deck. It feels less like night and more like a dream that has gone on too long. You close your eyes and hear the creaking again, the breathing, the faint hum of the watchman's tune. It is easy to see how the mind starts to unravel here. The ocean has no silence, only repetition. Even rest becomes work. Yet in that strange space between waking and sleep, something keeps the men alive. Maybe it is habit, maybe hope, or maybe the ship itself, carrying them forward through a darkness that never truly ends. The wind returns before sunrise, howling across the deck like an angry voice. You wake to the sound of canvas snapping overhead, the ship tilting sharply as waves slam against the hull. The calm that held for days is gone. The sea is alive again, dark and violent. You grab the nearest rope to steady yourself, your breath turning white in the air. The pirates are already awake. Shouts echo through the storm as men rush to their stations. The cold rain stings like shards of glass against your skin. Salt water sprays over the bow, freezing almost instantly when it hits the wood. The air smells of iron and fear. Historical accounts describe winter storms as the true test of seamanship. In fair weather, a ship obeys her crew. In a gale, she remembers her own will. You can see it now. The deck pitched steeply to one side, barrels breaking free, ropes snapping like whips. The men fight to regain control, their boots slipping on the slick planks. One pirate clings to the rigging, shouting orders, his voice nearly swallowed by the wind. Another tries to haul a frozen line, his fingers raw and bleeding. The sails strain so hard that you expect them to tear. Each gust feels like a living thing pushing back against every effort. A curious note from a 16th century logbook mentions sailors describing storms as the sea's tantrums. They swore that the water itself could sense fear. The more the crew panicked, the harder the wind blew. The pirates here seem to believe it too. They grit their teeth, muttering curses and prayers together, trying to sound braver than they feel. Lightning flashes far away, lighting the clouds in pale silver. For a brief second, you see the horizon vanish. The sea and sky merge into one raging wall. The next moment, everything is dark again. The thunder follows, distant but growing closer. The captain appears from his cabin, coat whipping in the wind, pistol still tucked into his belt. His eyes scan the chaos. "Hold fast!" he roars. The men obey. Even fear cannot drown discipline when survival depends on it. He grips the wheel himself, his hands white on the wood. The ship shudders under his command, fighting every wave. You feel the cold sinking deeper now. The rain turns to sleet, each drop a needle on your face. The ropes are stiff, the sails heavy. One man slips and crashes into the mast, groaning as others pull him to his feet. No one stops working. Pain has no time here. A fascinating entry from an old chronicler tells how sailors during northern winters sometimes used whale oil to coat their hands before storms, hoping it would keep the frost from cracking their skin. The smell was vile, but it worked. You can almost imagine it now. The greasy texture mixed with salt and blood, helping them cling to life a few minutes longer. The sea rises again, lifting the ship high before slamming it down. The sound of the impact rattles through your bones. The lanterns flicker violently, throwing light across terrified faces. You hear someone laughing, sharp and wild. It is the kind of laughter that comes from men who have accepted that control is an illusion. One of the pirates shouts over the wind, "She's testing us!" Another spits into the storm, answering, "Then let her test." The others cheer weakly, their voices blending with the thunder. Defiance becomes warmth when there is nothing else to hold. Experts today still argue about how such ships survived winter storms without modern tools. Some credit experience, others luck. Perhaps it was both. The wood bends, but does not break. The ropes hold, though they creak like bones. The crew moves as one body, each motion a prayer that the next wave will not be the last. You crawl toward the rail and peer into the black water below. The waves glow faintly where lightning reflects off their edges. The sight is beautiful and horrifying at once. The ocean looks endless, alive and hungry. You feel a strange calm settle over you, a surrender that comes from realizing how small you truly are. The storm rages on. The captain grips the wheel, his voice hoarse from shouting. The men haul lines, bail water, patch tiers. Hours blur together. The world has shrunk to the ship and the wind and the endless rhythm of survival. Each second feels stretched, heavy with meaning. Then, without warning, the thunder stops. The wind weakens. The sea exhales, still restless but no longer furious. The ship drifts slowly, battered but upright. The men slump where they stand, too tired to cheer. One sits against the mast, head bowed, his hands shaking. Another wipes his face and mutters a thank you to whatever power he still believes in. A single ray of pale light breaks through the clouds. It touches the deck, the ropes, the bruised faces of the crew. The pirates look up, their expressions blank, too weary for relief. The storm has passed, but it has taken something with it. You can feel the emptiness it leaves behind, like the silence after shouting. You breathe deeply, the air sharp in your lungs. The cold feels different now, less cruel, more real. Around you, the men begin to move again, checking damage, tying knots, scraping ice from the rails. They do not speak of fear or luck. They simply return to their rhythm. The sea has tested them, and for tonight, they are still here. Morning arrives without color. The world is a blur of grey, and the air feels as still as glass. The storm has ended, but what it left behind is worse in its own quiet way. The cold has deepened, sharp enough to sting the lungs with every breath. You step onto the deck, your boots crunching on a crust of frozen salt. The sea around the ship has slowed, thickened, and now floats with patches of ice drifting close together like cracked mirrors. The sails hang limp and heavy, glazed with frost. Each rope glitters faintly, stiff and unmoving. The pirates move carefully, their steps cautious. No one speaks much. The ship seems suspended between motion and stillness, alive but trapped in a world turned white. A record from a 15th century expedition describes mornings like this as waking inside a frozen breath. The sea stopped feeling like water. The sound of waves softened until it became a muffled hum, as if the ocean had gone to sleep. You feel that now. The air is thick with silence. Even the wind seems afraid to stir. One of the men leans over the rail and stares into the icy water. Sheets of thin ice bump against the hull with a hollow, ringing sound. He reaches out with a pole and pushes them away, but more drift in from the horizon. Another man joins him, muttering about how the sea looks like a graveyard. No one laughs. The frost has claimed everything. The deck glows faintly under the weak light, each board glistening like marble. When you touch the rail, it burns your skin with cold. The pirates pull scarves higher over their faces, their beards crusted white. Even their breath freezes briefly before fading into the air. A small but telling detail from one explorer's account notes that when the cold reached this point, ships began to grow quiet, not only because of weather, but because sound itself dulled. The cold thickened the air, swallowing noise. The usual creaks and groans of the vessel softened into whispers. You listen carefully now. The ship still moves, but its voice has changed, gentler, subdued. Below deck, the air is warmer but foul. The pirates huddle in layers of wool and canvas, some sleeping, some just staring into space. The lanterns barely hold their flame, their light dim and steady. The heat from the coals does little against the creeping frost along the walls. When one man exhales, you can see his breath drift upward like a ghost. Historians often write of this part of a voyage as the hardest, the stillness after the storm. The adrenaline fades, leaving only exhaustion and cold. There are no fires to tend, no winds to fight, only waiting. And waiting, at sea, is the cruelest labor of all. You climb back to the deck, where a few men chip at the ice gathering along the rail. Their movements are slow and rhythmic. One taps with a hammer, another scrapes with a blade. The sound carries faintly, echoing through the still air. It feels like working inside a frozen cathedral. A curious tradition from Scandinavian sailors claimed that whistling could wake the wind. Crews stuck in frozen calm would whistle softly together, believing that the sound called the sea back to life. One of the pirates begins to do it now, a thin, shaky tune. Another joins in, then another, until a faint chorus drifts across the deck. The sound feels fragile but defiant. The sky brightens slightly, and the faintest hint of sun appears, a pale circle without warmth. The light reflects off the ice, flooding the ship in a soft white glow. It is beautiful, almost holy, and yet there is danger in it. The pirates shield their eyes as the brightness bounces from the frozen sea. For a moment, the world feels too bright to be real. A sailor drops his hammer suddenly. The noise echoes like a gunshot. Everyone turns to look. The man stares at his hands red and stiff. Frostbite has taken hold, spreading pale patches across his fingers. Another man helps him wrap them in cloth, rubbing gently. No one speaks. Pain has become a private matter here. Experts still debate how crews in medieval winters managed injuries like these without proper medicine. Some records describe heated stones pressed against the skin. Others mention wrapping hands in animal fat to keep blood flowing. The pirates here likely know a few of these tricks. Survival leaves little room for hesitation. The ship creaks again as a sheet of ice slides against its side. The sound is deep and slow, like the groan of something ancient. You look out over the horizon, where the sea has turned white. The ice spreads endlessly, glinting in the light. It feels as if the world itself has stopped breathing. One of the pirates murmurs that they have entered a place where time does not move. Another spits and says it is just the sea sleeping. Their words hang in the air, frost-laden and fragile. You find yourself hoping the second man is right. A detail from a medieval poem about northern sailors reads, "The sea lay still as thought, and our hearts froze with it. Standing here now, you understand what that means. The stillness is more frightening than the storm. There is no motion, no sound, only the vast white emptiness that swallows all sense of direction. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. The ice crackles faintly, the ship sighs, and the men's breathing blends into the sound. The sea, though frozen, still lives beneath it all, patient and waiting. And you realize that even in silence it is never truly still. The cold only hides the movement until it chooses to wake again. The ice thickens as the day drags on. The ship pushes forward inch by inch, its hull grinding against the frozen surface. The sound is deep and aching, like teeth on stone. You feel each vibration under your feet, a steady reminder that the ocean is no longer water but something harder, heavier, and crueler. The pirates move slowly now, their steps cautious. Every rope, every tool, every finger feels stiff. Even speech seems to take effort. The air is so cold that words turn to mist before they are finished. You can see breath hanging between them, like pale smoke. Near the bow, two men pry open a storage chest, their movements sluggish. Inside are pieces of loot wrapped in cloth, silver cups, coins, a gold chain tangled with bits of rope. They stare at the treasure for a moment, then close the lid without touching it. The gold looks strange in this light, pale and lifeless. Old chronicles from northern expeditions record similar moments, when wealth lost its meaning. Men who once killed for coins would trade all of it for a handful of warmth. One sailor wrote, "The ice made fools of us. For what use is gold when the fingers that hold it are frozen?" You see that truth written in the pirate's eyes. A curious entry from a captured ship's ledger tells of pirates hiding their loot inside barrels of salted meat to keep it from freezing and splitting. When they opened the barrels weeks later, the coins had turned black from the salt. The crew threw most of it overboard, disgusted. Treasure, after all, cannot feed or warm you. The pirates gather near the main mast where a small fire glows inside an iron bowl. The flame burns low and blue, fed by scraps of tar and broken wood. They hold their hands over it, silent. The light glints off their faces, off the dull metal trinkets they wear, and for a moment, the fire's flicker looks like reflected gold. One of them laughs softly, though it is not a cheerful sound. "All the riches in the world," he says, "and we're burning bits of our own ship." The others chuckle weakly, nodding. The joke tastes bitter in the cold air. Historians who study piracy in the North Atlantic often note that greed did not vanish in winter. It simply changed form. When survival became the only currency, warmth was worth more than silver, and a piece of bread carried the weight of a king's ransom. You can feel that inversion here, in the way the men guard the fire more fiercely than the gold below deck. The ice scrapes louder against the hull, a sound that makes everyone flinch. The captain appears, his coat lined with frost, his expression grim. "She's slowing," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. The crew looks out toward the horizon, where sheets of ice stretch as far as the eye can see. Some are jagged like broken glass, others smooth as polished stone. The path forward is vanishing. A strange practice from a 15th century whaling crew is mentioned in a surviving diary. To keep hope alive, men would toss a single coin into the ice and make a wish for thaw. It was a ritual of faith more than logic. One of the pirates does something similar now. He pulls a small coin from his pocket, kisses it, and throws it into the frozen water. It skitters across the surface, ringing faintly before disappearing into a crack. No one mocks him. They all watch until the sound fades. The wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of salt and smoke. The fire sputters, and one man shields it with his hands. Another wraps his cloak tighter and mutters, "The sea takes what it gave." His words feel heavy, a truth no one wants to face aloud. Experts continue to argue whether pirates sailing northern routes ever lost entire ships to the ice, as Arctic explorers later did. Evidence is scarce, but the legends say yes. They speak of vessels found years later, trapped in solid ice, their decks coated in frost, their crews still aboard, preserved like statues. Looking around this ship, you can almost believe it could happen tonight. The cat pads across the deck, pausing near the fire. It curls beside the iron bowl, tail twitching slowly. The men watch it, some smiling faintly. Its fur catches the light, gleaming like warm ash. In this frozen world, even that small movement feels alive, a sign that something still resists the cold. The sun begins to sink again, a pale disk swallowed by clouds. The light fades quickly, leaving behind a strange glow that reflects from the ice. The ship looks ghostly now, floating in a world of silver and grey. The air grows quieter, the sound of grinding ice slowing to an occasional groan. One pirate holds out his hand, catching flakes of snow. "Looks like ash," he says softly. Another nods. "Maybe it is." The words drift away before anyone can answer. You look down at your boots, half buried in frost, and realize how small your movements have become. Every breath feels slower, every thought weighed down by the cold. Yet somewhere deep below, the sea is still moving. You can feel it in the faint sway of the deck, a pulse that refuses to die. The fire flickers again, its glow shrinking. One man feeds it the last scrap of wood. The flame catches for a moment, then steadies. The pirates lean closer, their faces ghostly in the dim light. Around them lies all the wealth they ever wanted, frozen and useless. What keeps them alive now is not gold but each other's breath, the rhythm of hearts still beating in defiance of the cold. The night that follows feels endless. The wind has stilled again, but the silence carries a weight that makes even breathing sound too loud. You move across the deck carefully, your boots crunching softly on the thin crust of frost. The world is so still that each sound seems to echo across miles. The pirates barely move now. Most lie in their hammocks or huddle near the galley, conserving strength. Every movement costs effort. Every thought drags like an anchor. When morning finally comes, it arrives without color. The sky and sea merge into the same dull grey, making it impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. The ice that surrounded the ship has loosened slightly, broken by the faint push of the current. The ship creaks, sighing as if waking from a deep sleep. One by one, the pirates stir. They look like shadows of their former selves. Faces gaunt, lips cracked, eyes dull with exhaustion. Yet there is a quiet endurance in them too, the strange stubbornness that belongs to people who have survived everything except comfort. A fragment from a 15th century sailor's diary speaks of this moment after the worst of winter, when the sun finally returns, but the soul feels too tired to notice. "We were alive," he wrote, "but half of us were ghosts already." You can see that truth reflected here in the grey light washing over the deck. A few men rise to their feet, stamping slowly to wake their blood. One pours a trickle of rum into a tin cup, hands shaking as he passes it around. They drink in silence. The warmth spreads briefly through their bodies, a tiny rebellion against the cold. The ship rocks gently now, as if testing its own strength. The ice groans beneath it, splitting in slow cracks that echo like distant thunder. The men pause to listen. The sound of ice breaking means freedom. It also means danger, for sharp edges can tear through the hull as easily as blades. They hold still, waiting to see which it will be. The captain appears on deck, shoulders hunched, face grey under the frost. He glances at the horizon, where faint light glows through the mist. "It's moving," he says quietly. His voice is hoarse but steady. A few men look up, hope flickering weakly in their eyes. A curious passage from an early explorer's account describes the first sunrise after weeks of darkness. The writer called it a wound of light in a frozen world. You feel the same sensation now as the sky brightens, the pale sun lifting above the edge of the sea. Its warmth is weak, but its presence alone seems to wake the ship. The pirates straighten slowly, turning their faces toward the light. They stand close together, sharing the little heat it offers. Some smile faintly, Others close their eyes, as if afraid it might disappear. The glow paints their cheeks in pale gold, bringing life back into the scene for the first time in weeks. A small sound interrupts the stillness, the crackle of rope snapping somewhere above. Everyone looks up. A line of ice has formed across the mainsail, and as it thaws unevenly, the tension pulls too tight. The captain shouts a quick order, and two men climb the rigging to fix it. Their movements are clumsy, but their determination is fierce. You can feel the ship awaken again, creaking, shifting, alive. One pirate begins to sing softly under his breath. The tune is simple and slow, a song about ports and warmth and women left behind. Others join in quietly, their voices rough but steady. The sound fills the air, fragile but real. It spreads across the ship like a returning heartbeat. Historians often debate what kept crews like these from giving up during winters that stripped them of everything. Some say superstition, others discipline or luck. But looking at these men now, it feels simpler than that. What keeps them alive is the rhythm they share, the belief that another sunrise always comes. The sun climbs higher, and for the first time in days, it feels almost warm on your face. You watch as the ice continues to drift apart, breaking in slow, graceful movements. The sound is deep and echoing, a kind of music in itself. One man laughs softly, another whispers, "She's letting us go." The captain stands by the wheel, watching the horizon. His coat flutters faintly in the breeze. He does not smile, but there is a softness in his eyes now, a quiet gratitude. He looks at his men, then at the sea, and nods once, as if acknowledging a truce. A curious story told in the ports of Bergen speaks of ships that survived impossible winters because the ocean pitied them. Sailors swore the sea could grow tired of cruelty, releasing those who had learned humility. Whether true or not, you can almost believe it here. The ice parts slowly, and the ship drifts forward into open water. The men cheer, weak but sincere. Their voices echo over the frozen expanse carried by the faint wind. The cat darts across the deck, tail high, chasing a patch of sunlight. For the first time in weeks, you hear laughter without bitterness. You grip the railing, feeling the ship tremble as it moves again. The sound of creaking wood returns, louder now, fuller. The sea is still cold and merciless, but it is moving, and movement is life. The pirates gather near the bow, watching the horizon brighten. They look like survivors of a dream too long held, their faces lined with fatigue but touched by hope. In the glow of morning, they are no longer just men of violence and greed. They are simply human beings who have endured the impossible. The ship pushes forward through the last fragments of ice, and behind it, the frozen sea closes quietly, leaving no trace of the struggle. Ahead, the open water waits, dark but alive, and for the first time in a long while, the air carries the faint scent of salt instead of death. The ship drifts toward the southern winds at last. The sea, though still cold, begins to breathe again. The ice has loosened its grip, and water ripples in small waves that gleam faintly under the weak Sunday. The air feels lighter. It carries the first scent of open water, that sharp tang of salt and freedom. The pirates move slowly, but with purpose. The stiffness in their limbs begins to fade, replaced by quiet energy. The sound of ropes tightening, sails flapping, and boots against the deck fills the air again. It is not the noise of triumph, but of return. They are alive, and that is enough. One of the men laughs, a dry, broken sound. Another claps him on the back. Their smiles are faint but real. You can sense a change among them, something softer than before. The long nights of frost and fear have stripped them of their bravado. What remains is a kind of honesty, born from survival. A record from a 15th century Dutch ship describes this same moment after a long freeze. The writer called it the thaw of the soul. When warmth returned, so did laughter, and the simplest things became miracles. A warm breeze, a soft wave, a bird in the distance. You can see that awakening here as well. The cat stretches on the deck, its fur catching the Sunday. It yawns, curls its tail, and begins to chase a bit of rope moving in the wind. The men stop to watch for a moment. One shakes his head and mutters that the beast is braver than all of them. The others chuckle quietly. The sound carries across the water, gentle and human. A curious entry in a sailor's log from the Baltic tells how, after long winters, crews often forgot the sound of their own laughter. The first time they heard it again, they would stop and listen, as if afraid it might break. You feel the same stillness here now as the laughter fades, fragile but precious. The sun climbs higher, pale and hesitant. The light spreads across the deck, warming the wood until the frost begins to melt in thin rivulets. Drops of water fall from the ropes and rigging, each one catching the light like a small gem. The ship smells different now: wet wood, thawing tar, and faint smoke from the galley, life returning in scent and sound. Historians still question how pirate crews handled the first days after surviving such hardship. Some believe they celebrated wildly at the next port, drowning fear in drink and noise. Others think they grew quiet, unwilling to break the spell of survival. Watching these men, it feels closer to the latter. Their joy is not loud. It hums softly beneath their movements, a rhythm that matches the calm sea. The captain stands near the helm, watching the horizon. His face remains hard, but his eyes follow the water with care. He says nothing for a long while, then finally murmurs, "South. Keep her south." The men obey without question. Their trust is silent now, born not of command but of shared endurance. The sails fill with a light wind. The ship groans but moves forward with ease. The sound of the water lapping against the hull is steady, almost soothing. You lean against the railing, feeling the vibration through the wood. It feels like a heartbeat slowly finding its rhythm again. A small gull appears in the distance, circling once before gliding away. The men notice it immediately. One points and says, "Land soon." The others nod, hope flickering like flame. Whether the bird truly means land or not does not matter. Belief itself is warmth now. Below deck, the air smells faintly of smoke and salt. The hammocks hang empty for once. The men prefer to stay above, to see the sky and feel the Sunday. One stirs a pot of thin soup in the galley, humming a tune so low it blends with the sound of the sea. Another mends a torn sleeve, the needle trembling in his hand but steady enough to finish the job. A curious fact from naval records shows that during recovery from cold voyages, sailors often became restless when warmth returned. They could not sleep easily, as if their bodies no longer trusted comfort. The pirates seem the same now, their eyes darting often to the horizon, waiting for something unseen. The afternoon light softens to gold. The water ahead glimmers faintly, and the ice is gone entirely now. The ship moves freely, and with each gentle tilt, the memory of stillness fades. One man begins to whistle an old tavern song. It wavers at first, then strengthens as others join in. The sound spreads through the air like sunlight through clouds. The captain listens but does not stop them. He leans on the railing, hands clasped behind his back. The tune drifts upward, mingling with the cries of the gulls. You watch the men sing and realize they are no longer thinking of the cold or the storm or even the deaths that haunt them. They are thinking of home, whatever shape that takes in their minds. The sun sinks slowly toward the horizon. The sky blushes with faint pink and orange, colors that have not been seen in weeks. The sea reflects it perfectly, calm and endless. The ship glides forward into the light, its sails glowing faintly. The men fall quiet, not wanting to disturb the moment. You breathe deeply, the air soft against your throat. The cold still lingers, but it no longer feels cruel. It feels like memory, sharp, distant, but fading. The pirates stand together, eyes fixed on the sunset. In their silence lies gratitude, and perhaps the smallest seed of peace. The sun sets slowly, and the sky melts into a deep, calm blue. The horizon glows faintly as the first stars appear. The pirates stand quiet, their shadows stretching long across the deck. The cold has softened to a gentle chill, the kind that brushes rather than bites. The ship glides on steady waters, her hull whispering softly with each wave. You move along the deck, taking in the scene. The men are still, not from fatigue but from reflection. Some lean against the railing, watching the sea. Others sit cross-legged near the mast, heads tilted back to study the stars. Their eyes seem clearer now, the wildness of hunger and cold replaced by something gentler. Historical accounts often describe how sailors changed after surviving winter seas. They grew quiet, superstitious still, but also tender in strange ways. Men who once cursed freely began to hum old songs, carve bits of wood, or keep journals they could barely write. Perhaps survival teaches reverence. The cat sits on a coil of rope, its fur gleaming in the moonlight. It cleans its paws slowly, indifferent to the world. The men take comfort in its calm. One scratches its back with the tip of a finger, smiling faintly. The small sound of purring fills the still air like a reminder that life continues, no matter how much the sea has taken. Below deck, the lanterns burn brighter tonight. The men have lit more than usual, as if defying the darkness. The light flickers on the walls, turning the wood to gold. You walk through the narrow passage, past hammocks swinging gently. The smell of smoke and salt still lingers, but it feels different now. It smells like warmth instead of confinement. A few men sit together near the galley, sipping from shared cups. The cook hums while stirring a pot of thin stew. Steam curls upward, ghost-like, catching the glow of the lantern. It is not a feast, but it is warm, and that alone feels like wealth. One man lifts his bowl and toasts softly. To the ones who did not freeze, the others echo him quietly. There are no speeches, no boasts, just acknowledgement. You return to the deck. The sea is calm, so calm that it reflects the stars like polished glass. The air feels clean, untouched. You breathe it in deeply, and for a moment, the world seems to hold its breath with you. A faint mist gathers on the horizon, glowing faintly under the moon. The pirates notice it too. "Fog," one whispers. Another shakes his head. "Not fog, ghost light." They stare for a moment longer, then smile faintly, each interpreting it as they wish. The sea is generous with mysteries, and after all they have seen, none feel the need to question them anymore. Experts who study seafaring culture often speak of the way myth and memory blend at sea. Stories begin as survival, then soften into comfort. You can sense that happening here. Each man carries his own version of what they have endured, reshaped into something bearable. By the time they reach port, the cold will have turned to legend. The captain stands near the wheel, his posture easier than before. His eyes are on the horizon, though his expression is unreadable. You imagine his thoughts wandering to shore, to warmth, to faces long unseen, to the strange piece of land. He notices you watching and gives a single nod. It feels like gratitude, or maybe farewell. The night grows quieter still. One by one the pirates drift toward rest. The hammocks fill again, swaying lightly. The air carries the rhythm of breathing and the occasional snore. The ship's timbers creak softly, a lullaby for the weary. You stand by the railing, staring at the faint glow on the water. The fog thickens, wrapping the ship in silver. The sea murmurs, gentle and endless. The sound is not threatening now, but soothing, like the world whispering a secret you almost understand. You close your eyes, and the cold air touches your face like a hand in blessing. You think of the nights before, the frost, the fear, the fire that barely warmed. All of it feels far away now, softened by survival. The pirates who sleep below have crossed something invisible, not just a sea of ice, but the edge between endurance and understanding. They have seen the world at its harshest and found a way to rest within it. The fog curls higher, glowing faintly under the moon. The ship moves slowly, its sails full of soft wind. Somewhere ahead lies land, though no one knows how far. It does not matter. Tonight, the sea is calm, and that is enough. You take one last look at the stars reflected on the water. They flicker gently, as if waving farewell. The sound of the sea deepens, rhythmic, eternal. The cold no longer bites. It hums softly, a companion rather than an enemy. You breathe in, close your eyes, and let the world fade into that sound. The sea drifts around you now, a cradle instead of a threat. The ship glides slowly through the mist, its motion almost imperceptible. Every sound is softened, the whisper of water, the faint creak of rope, the gentle rustle of cloth. Even your heartbeat seems to slow, blending with the steady rhythm beneath your feet. The air is cool but kind. It smells faintly of salt and smoke, and somewhere nearby, a lantern burns low, its light steady and golden. You hear the quiet murmur of sleep below deck, the sighs of men who have finally found peace. They have faced storms, frost, and silence, and now they dream in warmth. The ship itself seems to breathe with them, exhaling gently into the night. You let your eyes wander across the horizon. The mist has thickened into a soft wall of silver, glowing faintly under the moon. Beyond it, the world is still and vast. Somewhere out there lies a distant shore, but there is no hurry to find it. For now, there is only calm. You rest your hands on the railing. The wood feels smooth and cool, solid beneath your fingers. The ship rocks gently, each movement slower than the last. The stars shimmer above, mirrored perfectly in the quiet water below. Everything has come full circle. You inhale once more, deeply, and let the air settle inside you. The cold that once hurt now soothes. The dark that once threatened now comforts. The ocean hums its lullaby, steady and endless, and you realize that even here, in this frozen corner of the world, there has always been warmth waiting to be found. Sleep comes easily now,